The story begins with a young man thanking a girl for dancing at a ball and saying that he had a good time. Suddenly, she heard Duke Adler's voice behind her, asking what about her, whether she had had a good time too. He didn't look very friendly, and when the silence dragged on, the young man hissed at her to answer the question she had asked. Our heroine began to justify herself by saying that she danced with Duke Killian only because the host of the house said that the guests of honor should dance first. Then she quickly began to say that they stood out too much when they stood there in the middle of the hall, and that it would be better to return to their seats. But suddenly, the young man grabbed her hand and pulled her sharply towards him, after which he asked if he could invite her to dance. She told him that she fell in love with him at first sight, so why then was she dancing with another man? The girl replied that she was dancing so that no problems would arise at the banquet. The guy leaned towards her and said that he couldn't let go of his woman's past. Our heroine didn't understand what he meant. But the Duke continued and added that if he smelled the scent of another man from her, he would simply kill both of them. Yes, there are some things that are best not forgotten. Even if you are very busy, one of those things is the fact that she is the migrant of this novel, and that the man standing in front of her is her future killer. The day she first moved in was not at all suitable. The king was indignant that Charlotte was late again. Tomorrow, the news of their engagement will be announced throughout the empire, and the wedding will take place in 6 months. This young man is her fiancé, Duke Irenicus Fondam Adler. At first, our heroine couldn't understand what was going on, but when she heard this name, she remembered something. The synopsis of the novel she was going to read yesterday came to mind about a good-for-nothing princess who becomes the 8th victim of a serial killer on her wedding night. Her fiancé is the suspect, and the man and woman investigating the case fall in love. The girl hadn't rested for 5 days. She must have been very tired. The novel kept her in suspense, so she couldn't tear herself away. But the fact that she became the main character of this novel simply boggles the mind. Suddenly, the guy came closer to her and greeted her, adding that they were seeing each other for the first time in the presence of His Majesty the Emperor. When there was no reaction from the girl, His Highness exclaimed, "Where are her manners? After all, she is engaged." If she asks him again about an engagement with Duke Cillian, then he has nothing more to say. And when she ever spoke kindly, last time, she cried and screamed on the floor in his office. Has she completely gone crazy or something? Charlotte didn't understand who they were talking about and replied that she was fine and shouldn't be nervous. But my father still couldn't calm down, and just in case reminded her that if she didn't listen to him this time, he would deprive her of her princess status. Our heroine asked him to stop and first just listen to her, but the emperor immediately interrupted her and asked the servant to take them to the guest room so that they could greet each other in private. While the girl was indignant that he really wasn't going to listen to her at all, the Kamerger said that it was better to do what the emperor ordered. Finding herself alone with him, Charlotte noted to herself that the Duke behaved completely differently in front of the emperor. Then she noticed the newspaper, which said that Adler had been chosen as the most desirable man for the 3rd year in a row, the most eligible bachelor of the empire. He had money, fame, and good looks. Everyone was eager to find out what lucky woman he would take as his wife. The young man is the most desirable groom in the entire empire with an impeccable resume. And his bride is she, a completely worthless princess. Suddenly, the guy said that he understood perfectly well that she wanted to tie the knot with someone else. Probably there was not a single person in the entire empire who did not know this, but since this was a marriage of convenience, and they had no other reasons to see each other, he suggested that they meet at the wedding itself. Our heroine noted to herself that she would be killed on her own wedding day. "We will meet at the wedding itself," means that he will kill her at their next meeting. Who would have thought that the most modest man of the empire is a serial killer? In her past life, she was a prosecutor in the Violent Corruption Crimes Unit, which was up to its neck in investigating murders. To avoid becoming Charlotte this time, she must find evidence of a serial killer in the 6 months before their wedding. There is only one way to do this. She will enter into another relationship as a cover to find all the evidence. After which she turned to the young man and said that she fell in love with him at first sight. Please let him be with her. The guy was so confused that he froze with his mouth open looking at her, after which he asked what she was talking about. The girl replied that she fell in love with the Duke at first sight. She wants to marry for love and not for convenience. The guy asked irritably if she really wanted him to believe this. Until today, she's been begging for a wedding with Duke Cillian. Even the yard dog knows about their attempts to convince His Majesty. This handsome brunette is the very same Duke mentioned by the Emperor and Adler. The princess must have fallen in love with someone since Duke Cillian did not reciprocate her feelings, and she apparently threw a tantrum, after which she replied that because of the guy's charms, she forgot about other men, and in general, she is so amorous. Now only the young man occupies her heart, and no one else. Suddenly, the emperor appeared in the room, and the girl immediately exclaimed that she was so glad that he had chosen Adler as her fiancé. She wanted to see him more often before they got married. The man noted that it seemed that their Charlotte had serious feelings for the Duke, how good it was that she had come to her senses, after which he turned to the young man and said that he could trust him with his daughter with an easy heart. After some time, a servant approached our heroine and said that she would help her with the wedding preparations. All the girl knew from the blurb was that she had become the disobedient Princess Charlotte, and that her fiancé was Duke Adler, who was suspected of a series of murders, so she needed more information. After which she asked the maid what her name was, and she replied, Hadson. When asked how long she had been working there, the maid replied that she had been working there for 4 years. Our heroine stated that then she should know her name. The girl replied that yes, Princess Charlotte Fonder House of Asgard. Our heroine muttered why the name was so long, then said that she wanted to be honest. She didn't remember anything until yesterday. To be honest, Charlotte doesn't even know who she is. The assistant explained that she was not feeling well and had lost her memory for several days due to the hunger strike, and no one from the royal council came poor princess. The girl noted to herself that perhaps the others had lasted so long only because they were filled with anger towards the real Charlotte, whom they had called a scoundrel. But what if you worked here for 4 whole years? It is obvious that Hadson is good. Then she said that one thing could be said for sure, that she trusted her and liked the girl very much. The maid exclaimed that she could not even imagine that she would treat her like that. The princess added that she did not want her situation to be known, so let it remain between them. She could only rely on her. Hadson immediately replied that of course from now on, she would take care of her, let him trust only her. And in general, if you think about it, the princess could have shown signs of memory loss. The landlady screamed that she really thought it was because of her. There was no need to talk nonsense. She would never do that. Who was she anyway? She had never had such a servant. Let her get out of here immediately. Our heroine felt awkward, but after that, she managed to find out about Charlotte from the maid. Her mother, who was the emperor's concubine, died during childbirth from complications. The emperor, who loved her mother very much, defied many by officially making her a princess. It would have been very good if he had also raised her normally, but the emperor did not care much about his daughter after she was given the status of princess. It was natural that the empress and her children, who were legitimate, disliked her. The aristocrats didn't pay any attention to her either. She was a princess on paper, but not in society. Then our heroine asked why she decided to go on a hunger strike. The maid replied that in fact, she was persuading His Majesty to marry Duke Cillian. This guy was Charlotte's unrequited love. He openly despised the naughty princess. So with her hunger strike, she put her life at risk, just for the sake of the wedding. Love is a terrible thing. Despite the princess's disobedient behavior, Duke Adler agreed to marry her. I wonder how he already found a benefit. Then she asked her assistant to bring her the newspapers for the previous week. They live in a society with a developed media culture. There must be some benefit from it. If there is talk about a serial killer, then it means that this is the most discussed topic now in the news with an open investigation. In the end, she found the information she needed. So far, there were only 4 victims. She needed to find out more about this before she became the 8th victim. Then she called out to her personal maid and said that she needed an assistant. After some time, Hadson asked why she was looking for an assistant among the prisoners. The girl answered, because only they understand the villains. Having met some guy, the maid said that he was her cousin Stemford. He works as a guard at the prison, so she warned him. The young man greeted the princess and then turned to prisoner 0221 and ordered him to leave. He whispered to her that she should be careful since he had previously attacked nobles. The prisoner immediately said that if the princess wanted to torture him for fun, then it was better not to, as she had already heard he was a mad dog who bit nobles. The maid explained that John attacked the lieutenant and also attacked the nobles in the hopes of reaching the nobility. She will dare to express an opinion that goes beyond the topic, but a meeting with Watson could be dangerous for the princess. The girl replied that she was aware of this, but that they should both leave them since she wanted to talk to him about something. Left alone with him, Charlotte said that she was not going to torture him, but instead let him earn his loyalty. When asked what this meant, the princess explained that she could pay his bail by showing her identification. The guy asked why the princess would do this if she was going to play with him like a toy. Then there was no need. Our heroine replied that there was no need to worry, since she does not play with other people's destinies. There is something that she wants to get from him in return. She is looking for something, and she wants him to help her for 6 months. When asked why she was offering him this, the girl replied that she came because she knew that he had previously helped the imperial family. If the young man accepts her offer, he will become a servant in the princess's chamber, and in addition to the deposit, he will receive weekly payments. Plus, all of his mother's medical bills will be paid whether he agrees or not. After thinking for a while, the prisoner asked if he could address her as Master. Some time later, upon seeing our heroine, the young man exclaimed that he was asking for forgiveness and that she please have mercy on him. Charlotte stated that this was the first time he saw the princess in the library. Now they would see each other often, so please let him get used to it. The young man immediately replied that, of course, if she needed anything, she should just say so. The princess immediately handed him a note and told him to provide everything from it. After some time, the librarian brought her a family tree of the imperial family, a directory of the nobility, a history of the empire, and a constitution of the empire. Our heroine is good at learning, so she should remember everything that is written there and quickly adapt. Even if she has to spend nights there, she doesn't care. Her body is much weaker than the one from her previous life. Suddenly, Watson entered the room and said that just a day ago, he would never have thought that he would end up in the princess's room. When the young man called her master, Charlotte said that it was not a bad way to address her, but he did not need to maintain such strict subordination with her. John replied that if she wanted, it would be different. How about informal communication? She doesn't have to speak formally with her subordinate. Our heroine replied that, okay, and the first thing he could do for her was to read everything and then burn the piece of paper. Watson asked if she wanted him to collect information on serial killers. The girl replied that it would be great to see detailed records of all the cases. What makes a serial killer different from a common murderer is that he leaves special details at the crime scene, such as criminal habits. To confirm these habits, recordings come first. Suddenly, a maid ran into the room and announced that the emperor had ordered the princess to be present at today's breakfast meeting. The breakfast meeting is a weekly event where the emperor gets together with all his children and has a conversation. Of course, this is not just a breakfast. Ministers also take part in it, and they evaluate which of the emperor's children could succeed to the throne. Usually, Charlotte rarely appeared at such breakfasts, since she was the very last person who could succeed to the throne. Now, she did not understand why he suddenly decided to invite her, because this was not part of her plans. The maid said that His Majesty would increase the princess's sponsorship if she made a good impression. She spent all her money to hire a prisoner, so he should hurry up. Upon seeing our heroine, the emperor noted that the princess was late again. The girl asked for forgiveness and said that she simply found out about the invitation late. The emperor's firstborn, Prince Frederick, said he was sure the maids had not read the invitation. Camilla's younger sister immediately stated that she had never seen Charlotte read and whether she could do it at all. They hated the previous Charlotte, but our heroine is different, so she didn't react at all, which is why the guys asked what was wrong with her. Did she really have hearing problems? But the girl answered that she agreed everything they said was the pure truth. The emperor interrupted them and asked them to stop. He invited her, because Duke Adler was also present today. Isn't an engagement a favorable event for the empire? The sister stated that the hunger strike was worth it because she lost weight and was able to move from Duke Cillian to Duke Adler. The emperor's firstborn picked up that, yes, this is all only thanks to the hunger strike, but she still lacks some kind of education or culture. And in general, did she receive flowers? Camilla noted that it seemed like a floral scent was coming from her hair. When our heroine did not react in any way, but simply turned away, the girl began to get angry. Charlotte turned to Adler and winked at him. The guy was again so confused that he even spat out his tea. Then everyone began to talk about how a good harvest was expected this year. If it continued like this, then prices might fall. Perhaps the army would have to be used to plow the fields. Supplies would have to be reduced to maintain the previous price, or else exports to other countries would have to be organized. Suddenly, one of those present turned to our heroine and said that she had not visited them for breakfast for a long time. Would she share her opinion if she proposed to solve this problem as the sewing guide did last time? Then she could not answer. Our heroine thought to herself that she didn't need the throne anyway. She was just going to watch. Well then, if he continued, Charlotte wouldn't be able to stand it. After which she said that their proposals will not help solve the problem of whether the army will be happy with the fact that their task is now to collect wheat. What they are proposing is complete nonsense. The young man was indignant. What was she even talking about now? And the girl thought to herself that they should get rid of the police only after the harvest was good. Frederick's offer was focused exclusively on the demand-price balance. Camilla's offer is better than his offer, but the trade would work in today's world, not in this one. The empire subjugated other states through war, and these states repeatedly tried to regain their independence. They rebelled. They would have calmly exported grain in such a situation. The sister asked why she was silent, whether her idea was flawless, but our heroine objected that it was not. Export to nearby countries would be excellent provisions. Doesn't that pose a threat that's complete nonsense? In that case, they would have to pray to the god of war, so she has another suggestion. We need to stop growing wheat. It is better to choose farms that grow fruits and vegetables and pay them subsidies, then the wheat harvest will decline. Microeconomics easily solves the problems of price and quantity. It is good at microeconomics, and you can't beat it here. Camilla was indignant that she didn't understand this well and suggested growing fruits and vegetables on the land where they grew wheat. Charlotte replied that there are problems that can be solved by cultivation. If they produce barley and make liquor from it to sell, then there will be no problem with export. The emperor and the minister noted that she was right. They would get to know the girl from a new side. From now on, the princess will be present at breakfast every week, and this competition is over. Passing by our heroine, the sister hissed that there was no need to be especially happy, that she was just lucky today. Charlotte replied that of course, she was not at all happy, but she noted to herself that compared to criminals, the royal family swears very elegantly. In any case, she now had another goal, after which she approached Duke Adler and asked if he had forgotten that they had a date today. Everything was exactly the same, before the only thing that has changed is that now the Duke is openly watching her. Then she decided to break the silence and said that he had such a long name. Could she call him Renier? But the guy replied, no. The girl added that he could also just call her Charlotte, but the guy again said that no, he didn't want to. Our heroine noted to herself that he was very stubborn, after which she said that she had probably rushed too much, and now she would simply ask him a few questions, but he has the right to refuse to testify. The young man was surprised what she was talking about. The girl immediately realized that this was just a habit from a past life. She meant that she just wanted to get to know him better, because she fell in love with him at first sight. Have you forgotten? Let him look attentively. This is a look that reflects a burning passion for him. She already thought to herself that he was her type. It's just a pity that he was a murderer. The Duke said that she should ask her questions, and he would try to answer honestly. Our heroine immediately collected her thoughts and asked who his first love was. The guy was surprised why she needed this. The girl replied that it was important to know about her man's past. I noted to myself that the most important thing in a murder case is the motive, which is why it is so important to know about the suspect's past. It can shed light, especially if he killed his wife on the night of the wedding. Jealousy immediately comes to mind. So far, there is a hypothesis that the Duke had a lover, but the emperor forced him to marry his daughter. Was the crime really committed because of this? Suddenly, the young man said that the princess also had a difficult past, to which she replied that she had already dealt with it and now thought only of the Duke. He doesn't need to hide anything from her. She is a broad-minded person and will be understanding of her man's past. Adler replied that he didn't have a first love. She may not believe it, but it's true. The princess asked if she was the Duke's first and last woman. The young man replied that everything was correct, but what were there any problems or something? But in general, now he wanted to ask a question. The young man heard that if she takes on something, she will not let it go so easily. Is he one of such cases? The princess realized that he was hinting at her infatuation with Cillian. She didn't think she would be like that. Apparently, Mr. Serial Killer didn't want to get caught. The future husband added that he suddenly became interested in the reason for all this, what was so special about him. Our heroine thought to herself that he was making fun of her, after which she replied that she had simply fallen in love at first sight. The young man asked her to clarify what she fell in love with. He was very interested. Charlotte was confused and understood that if she did not answer, it would arouse suspicion. Then she said that light hair shining like sunlight on a wheat field, deep clear eyes, the color of a serene lake, smooth porcelain skin, a sharp nose like a sculpture, attractive lips, broad shoulders, tall stature, a muscular, well-defined body that seems chiseled, of velvety and sweet, but at the same time, cold voice. She fell in love immediately as soon as she saw his merits. Then she realized that it all sounded too pretentious, and now it had lost all meaning. The young man looked at her with distrust and replied that he understood. After some time, the maid asked if everything was okay with her. It seemed she had overworked herself. The girl replied that today had been a very hard day, both physically and mentally. The maid said that Mr. John was already waiting for her in the living room, but if she was very tired, she would tell him to come another time. The girl was really very tired, but the assistant had arrived because of the task she had assigned him earlier, so she couldn't send him away, let him invite her to the chambers. The maid was surprised how one could invite such a dangerous man into her bedroom. Charlotte noted that she probably thinks it's too much for her, but that kind of thing fits into her reputation. When John arrived, the princess apologized for being rude, but she was simply very tired and did not have the strength to leave the bedroom. The guy replied that it was okay and said that he brought what she asked her for in the morning. These were the protocols of the Imperial Bureau of Investigation, and she was very surprised that the young man was able to get them. It said that 16 weeks ago, the victim was a governess who died of suffocation. 15 weeks ago, there was a man, a high-class chef, found dead of suffocation. 10 weeks ago, there was a bakery owner, and 8 weeks ago, the Prime Minister's secretary died of the same. Having studied the information, our heroine concluded that all the deceased were strangled. John added that this means the suspect must be a trained man, at least 180 centimeters tall. The Duke is indeed a trained man who graduated from the Imperial Military Academy, but he is not the only one. They cannot prove his involvement based on that alone. When the girl said that it would be a good idea to examine the crime scenes, Watson said that the previous murder had been committed about 2 months ago, so the crime scene should have been cleared by now, and the body should have already begun to rot. They could only rely on the reports that had been drawn up. If he could find out why the princess was investigating a serial killer case, our heroine replied that it should remain a secret. The guy sighed heavily and replied that, okay, then he would just carry out her instructions without asking unnecessary questions about whether there was anything else he could do for her. The princess replied that she needed information about His Highness Duke Adler. The young man was surprised. Wasn't he her fiancé? It would be easier for her to find out information about him. And in general, what exactly is needed, his past connections, or what interests her? Our heroine replied that she wanted to know everything, and the more personal the information, the better. Charlotte couldn't share the reason for the investigation with him, yet if she accidentally let it slip that she was simply digging under Adler, the villain could use it against her. Meanwhile, the butler brought the Duke a letter from our heroine and said that they had been coming every day since they last saw each other. It was said that she cannot fall asleep as soon as she closes her eyes. His beautiful image appears before her. It seems to her that she will soon go crazy. When will they meet again? After some time, the maid ran to Charlotte and said that a letter from the Duke had finally arrived. The girl was surprised that he had been shy for so long, but now he had made up his mind. It said that he was waiting for her at 7 o'clock near the opera house. Hudson exclaimed that a date at the opera was so romantic. It was simply unbelievable. She needed to prepare well. Sometime later, when meeting the Duke, our heroine noted that today he looked simply wonderful. Charlotte almost thought that the sculpture that stands near the opera house. The Duke froze for a second, and then without saying anything, turned around and began to leave, and the girl ran after him and shouted that they needed to go together. While listening to the play, the boy said that he had heard that tickets were very difficult to get, as it was the best performance in the entire empire. The girl was thinking that if he was behaving like that, then why did she even need to invite him? It was so dark around, and you couldn't see his expression, and he didn't really want to talk, apparently, because he almost forced himself to do it. It seems as if he shows with all his actions that he does not want to talk, after which she said that she is not interested in this performance at all, even though it is expensive. She would rather just talk to him. She would be happy just to see his face. The young man replied that it was a pity, but he could not see her every day because he was very busy, so he could only find time several times a week. Charlotte objected that she wanted to see the Duke every day, but twice a week was at least something. She noted to herself that this was enough for what she needed and switched off. After some time, the young man carefully woke her up and said that it was better for her to get up. It turned out that the performance had already ended, and even everyone present had managed to disperse. The girl realized that it was all because of lack of sleep, but she noted to herself that she had slept on the shoulder of her future killer. Suddenly, the young man asked if it was because of him that she was not sleeping. Perhaps the reason was that she wanted to see him so much. Our heroine answered that yes, it was all because she was constantly thinking about him. Getting up from his chair, Adler said that next time they would need to discuss their meeting in advance so that she could get some sleep, but now it was time to go. A few days later, our heroine was handed an invitation for debutantes. The letter says that the Grand Duke Cillian will also be there. Will the lady go there? Our heroine reminded him that she was no longer interested in him. Hadson remembered that, indeed, she now liked Duke Adler. The princess asked if there was anyone new there, why they suddenly decided to organize such an event. The assistant replied that there was young Lady Moston. After this, Charlotte asked to let her look at the invitation. She thought to herself that the serial killer was not asleep, but she still could not find a connection in his murders. And in general, over the last 8 weeks, not a single murder has been committed. Why? The murderer's first victim was the governess of Count Moston, but Charlotte still could not find any connection. Then it dawned on her that the killer committed his crimes not because he was mentally ill, but because he had a reason to do so. Perhaps she could find a motive if she looked at how the family where the victim worked lived, after which she said that she had changed her mind and wanted to attend this event. The maid exclaimed that she would be meeting Cillian for the first time since her engagement and would have to look absolutely stunning, but the princess objected that she was no longer interested in him. When the maid muttered that she didn't have to be there, then our heroine opened the closet and asked what all those dresses were for. Then she wanted to wear something unusual and bright. A white dress embroidered with beads like snowflakes, reminiscent of a wedding dress. Stunning open dress with a neckline and open back. A magical dress that resembles cotton candy with lace. Hadson recalled that she always chose an outfit that would help her stand out from the crowd and win the Duke's attention. Charlotte objected that this would not help win attention. He would simply decide that she was crazy. The maid asked, "What about this dress? She wore it to Baroness Irina's wedding. It's made of cotton." When our heroine objected that she needed a new dress, the maid reminded her that they had already spent all the funding. Now, they have only one choice. What does she think about this dress? Her Highness grabbed her head and screamed, "No, not that." After some time, Charlotte said that if he was busy, then he did not need to come to the debutante ball and did not need to appear as her partner. The young man asked what her letter which he had received earlier was about. The girl did not understand what he was talking about and asked him to clarify what letter. The young man handed her a folded piece of paper and said that it was the same one he had received a few days ago. Is it true that she likes him so much? Our heroine answered that yes, it is absolutely true. This feeling is familiar both in heaven and on earth, and it is also known in the palace corridors. The guy asked, so then why does she say that he doesn't have to appear as her partner? Our heroine was surprised by such a reaction, because she thought that he would only be happy. After which she replied that she simply did not want the Duke to do something he did not like, just for her sake. Adler countered that he really didn't mind. He was already planning to attend Lady Moston's debutante ball, and if he couldn't do it with his fiancée as a partner, his reputation would suffer. The princess realized that she had to keep her face, and replied that she would be very glad to have his company, and in general, he should know something about the dress that she will be wearing all evening. How will he feel about her wearing an outfit with a deep neckline? The young man muttered that he didn't want to look old-fashioned in the eyes of others, but it turned out that she would look so frank in front of everyone. Charlotte muttered that, frankly, she simply ran out of money, so she couldn't buy herself anything new, not that she liked wearing anything provocative. Suddenly, the Duke turned around and began to leave, and the girl did not understand what was wrong. Did he really consider her too dissolute? After a while, the maid wished Her Highness a good time. Charlotte replied that this is exactly how it will be, and that she should not worry, since her goal is to provide income for the princess. When she appeared in the hall, she thought that this was some kind of nonsense, that, even being a princess, she had such a tiny budget today, she would win more trust from the emperor. After the duke slightly bowed his head, the girl did not understand what was happening, whether he had really been the first to greet her. Then Camilla turned her attention to the dessert with nuts, and was surprised because the emperor's chef should know perfectly well that she is allergic to them. Therefore, she shouted for it to be removed from the table immediately. The maid asked for forgiveness. The man interrupted her and said that it was time to start the meeting the agenda needed to discuss the impact of the disappearance of the magic stones and the wizards of their empire, and to plot a course for the future. Suddenly, someone said that we should listen to Princess Charlotte, because last time she gave good advice. While the girl was at a loss, the emperor told her to speak and not to be shy. But our heroine understood that if she failed now, everyone would think that she was just lucky last time. Suddenly, the maid who was ordered to eat the nut pancakes fell to the ground and began foaming at the mouth. The girl immediately ran up to her and saw that her nails had acquired a bluish tint. Dark brown spots had appeared on her skin, and a slight smell of almonds could be heard from her mouth. After which, she told everyone not to touch anything here, especially not to eat or drink. Glancing at the Duke, she thought that this murder was different from the others, which meant that the killer was someone else. Then she reported that the maid had suffered from cyanide. Someone had decided to poison everyone present. After some time, the knight reported that thanks to the princess, they were able to prevent a catastrophe. They took the powdered sugar that was sprinkled on the pancakes for analysis and found that it contained traces of cyanide. They also found the poison in the sugar bowl in the kitchen. Our heroine noted to herself that it turned out that someone had sprinkled powder on the food and plates, and the maid who served it had eaten pancakes that had been poisoned. It's just hard to believe that this could have been the work of their local chef. But the knight reported that the chef was not there today. The main dishes were prepared by the saucer. He does not admit his guilt and says that he does not understand how this happened. They tried to force him to talk. The girl objected, isn't the chef the main suspect? But the guy said that he wasn't there today. Charlotte objected again that he makes the menu for the week. All the dishes are his responsibility. He could do something with the powdered sugar and then leave. Salts and sugars are very expensive ingredients in the empire. The saucer would not use them. Perhaps it is worth arresting the chef before he escapes. The young man immediately ran and started shouting that it was necessary to hire a chef as soon as possible before it was too late. As expected, the imperial family's chef was captured while trying to cross the border. He turned out to be a spy from Corti who had infiltrated the palace some time ago. The empire subjugated this state 7 years ago during the war. Since then, they have been constantly fighting for their independence. The unsuccessful attempt on the life of the emperor by the spies from Corti only raised even more unrest. All those who had let the spy escape and were unable to prevent the attempt were executed. However, she still managed to earn a lot of points in the emperor's favor in this competition, as she wanted her father said that the girl was simply smart. It was not quite as she had imagined, but the emperor appreciated her contribution to this matter and doubled the budget. Our heroine caught the criminal, and her reputation and funding grew. She hopes it will continue to do so. On the way to her room, Charlotte wondered if it was only one boss who wanted to poison the emperor. And what if he worked in a team, so she felt uneasy, and it seemed like someone was following her. Moreover, Charlotte hates enough people, after which our heroine tripped and fell to the ground. Suddenly, John appeared and asked if she was okay. He heard her scream and came running to see what happened. But the girl only pressed herself against the young man and said nothing, but only trembled like an aspen leaf. Then she saw a cat nearby and realized who was chasing her. The girl had wound herself up too much. When the guy laughed at her needing help with her cat, our heroine asked him to stop and instead talk about his successes. The guy reported that Duke Adler leads a very lonely personal life. No scandals or rumors, as if he considers it a waste of time. But his father, Duke Adler Sr., is completely different. His family history is too complicated. His biological mother died of illness 5 years ago, and the current Duchess of Adler is his stepmother. Their relationship is very strained, but he is close with his younger sister, Princess Bloomer. Also, the young man did not serve in the army after graduating from the military academy, but only he knows why. Everyone says it was a given in the Asgard Empire experience in the army could help get a promotion. Since the emperor gained glory after winning the war, he took good care of his soldiers. But why then did the duke not go to serve? When Watson added that the first victim, who was a governess, also worked in the house of Duke Adler, the girl asked him to tell her more about this. The young man asked how she could investigate a serial killer when she was so timid and afraid even of the garden cat. Our heroine objected that she was simply in pitch darkness completely alone, and that was why she was scared. The young man said that she was a princess, so why didn't she have security? Charlotte replied that she had security, but she dismissed it because none of her guards looked like Cillian. The guy found this very funny and exclaimed that she was simply amazing, and the girl added that she would definitely find a worthy replacement. The young man immediately calmed down, looked at her, and asked if he could not put forward his candidacy. After some time, the maid stated that Watson simply had to properly protect her princess. Our heroine said that it was too hot outside, and they both had to help her choose a suitable dress. The assistant was very surprised and asked again whether the young man should also help her. Charlotte asked her to stop and said that he was actually guarding her for free. Hadson immediately changed her expression and tactics, after which she said that she really hoped for his help. Suddenly, the young man announced that there was very little time left until the official debut of the young Lady Mostyn. So many dresses had already been taken. The assistant came to the conclusion that they were very late, but the girl objected that nothing could be done. It was good that they would be able to buy something new. The most important thing was that the dress was elegant and worthy of her. After which she went to the outfits and said that she would try on each dress, and the two of them would help her with the choice. During the presentation of the first dress, the maid said that it did not emphasize her prettiness enough. While trying on the second one, the young man said that such an abundance of ribbons reminded him of a cupcake with too much cream on it. Everything our heroine tried on turned out to be unsuitable, so she began to get upset. But when she came out in another dress, the guys exclaimed that it was created as if for her. Charlotte looks just perfect. When asked if he liked John, he replied that now she really looked like a human, and he blushed. And it wouldn't hurt her to eat better. Let her just look at her wrists. Her wound from yesterday hasn't healed at all. When the salesman was told that they were buying this dress, the guy said that they would adjust it to her size and send it to the palace. On the way home near one of the cafes, the guys accidentally overheard a conversation between girls about the fact that this time both Cillian and Duke Adler would be present at the debut ceremony. It will obviously be a very interesting picture. It will be very interesting to see who she will ultimately give preference to. The interlocutor must be very uneasy about the fact that such a person will become her relative. Then they accidentally noticed the princess and began to greet her nervously, wishing her a good day. But Charlotte objected. How could she just leave without even a cup of tea when they had met by such a fateful accident? After which she asked what kind of relationship they had with the young Lady Mostyn. If it was not a secret, the girls began to chatter that they had only talked about this. They had such a relationship with their son Jean-Ri, it seems. Our heroine came to the conclusion that the four of them met at the academy. The girls answered that yes, then continued to talk about their own, that if this is Mr. Ian, then how can one not trust him? The other picked up that the Fragonato family is a famous family of perfumers, so they will definitely invest there. 3 of the girls present were daughters of families that supported Camilla. They followed her everywhere as if they were servants. They could not refuse her tea since Charlotte is a princess, but they were clearly not eager to talk to her. One of the girls said that they say that this time the minimum bet is 500 million gold, and this is especially for them. Another one picked up that if this investment brings a good income, then she plans to open a salon. The third one said that she was also going to invest all the money she had this time. Our heroine asked what business they were talking about now, but the girls immediately began to pretend that they had urgent matters to attend to, so they decided to take even the one who was sitting silently. As they were leaving, they chirped that they were very grateful for the time she had spent with them, and that it had been very interesting for them to talk to her. Charlotte stated that she still hadn't learned anything, so how could she be cut off at every word? The last of the girls modestly approached her, asked for forgiveness for today, and said that she also needed to leave. But the princess stopped her and said that she would not keep her for long, and that she should not even think about investing in the perfume business that Lady Christine had recently spoken about, because it was obvious even to a hedgehog that it was a setup. When asked what she meant, our heroine replied that, "Where is the guarantee of a large profit if the business has not even opened? And besides, there is no material manifestation of this business, only a collection of funds." She says this as someone with experience in dealing with such scammers. A guarantee of constant big profits is a synonym for the word fraud. She may find it hard to believe, but please let her not invest in this business. If this business really turns out to be profitable, then she will compensate her for all losses in the same amount. The girl asked in surprise why she needed all this. Charlotte replied that she should remember these words. She would let her know about it, since they would soon become relatives. This little girl was none other than Blair Fonden Adler, the younger sister of Duke Adler. When she thanked our heroine for the advice, she in turn said that if it turned out that it would help her, then she asked him to tell her about his brother. After his sister had left, the maid asked how everything had gone, since those girls were known for their impudence because of their support for Camilla. The princess replied that they said that if you sit on the shore for a long time, the enemy's body will float by itself. After all this, it turned out that our heroine also had to pay for everything that the girls ate. Some time later, when the dress for the debut was delivered, the maid suggested that they had simply made a mistake, but Charlotte objected that it was too expensive for such a mix-up. Then she found the attached note, and it turned out to be from the Duke of Adler, who said he would pick her up at about 6 o'clock. The maid exclaimed that he was so good, he even sent her a dress. Our heroine was very lucky with her fiancé. Having put on her outfit, the girl told the young man to take her carriage and go to Count Moston and let him wait for her somewhere until the end of the holiday just in case. After which she went to Duke Adler, who said that he was expecting her. On the way, the guy asked her if anything came to her mind. When she looked at his tailcoat, the girl replied that she couldn't help but notice how elegant and sophisticated the tailcoat he had chosen today was. No one could outshine it. The young man asked if this meant that she had fallen in love with him again. Our heroine replied that of course his charm was simply endless, but she thought to herself, what was going on with him? Was he really a narcissist? Meanwhile, at the ball, in honor of Lady Moston's debut in Soviet society, the guests were discussing how they couldn't believe that Duke Adler had chosen her, how imprudent he was. Charlotte noted that the most eligible bachelor of the empire and a worthless princess are just the thing for gossip. She feels so awkward. She has never been to such events. Can she even rely on the Duke today? Suddenly, the Marquis of Brege approached the young man and exclaimed that he did not expect to meet him at the debutante ball. And even the princess is here. He already thought he was going crazy. They themselves understand that it is difficult to catch them at such events. As for the girl, he did not expect to see her in such modest clothing. Our heroine replied that she decided to expand her clothing preferences. She was grateful for his attention to her. The Marquise replied that if he had only known that she was such a meek nature, he himself would have claimed her hand. He would have certainly offered his candidacy when His Majesty was independently looking for a groom for her. Charlotte wondered if he meant that no one wanted to be her fiancé, and then replied that it was a pity he was late. The young man pretended not to have heard anything, and then said that he needed to pick up the Duke for a while. He appeared so rarely in high society that everyone would jump out of their tailcoats and dresses from curiosity. Watching the young man, our heroine noted that surely all these people did not respect her, but Adler stood out among them. Perhaps the princess dressed like that because no one paid attention to her. After all, she had only been in her body for a few weeks, and already she had managed to become sympathetic to her. But if you think about it then, on the contrary, it's for the best that no one notices her, because she has one thing to do. Suddenly, turning the corner, the girl collided with the Duke of the northern part of Sicilian. The young man was not afraid of the imperial family, and therefore never hesitated to openly disgrace Charlotte, who was attached to him. So it would not be an exaggeration to say that the Archduke played the greatest role in the ridicule of society, so she would like to regain her dignity, at least in his eyes. When the young man was about to pass by in silence, our heroine asked him if he did not find such behavior towards the princess of this empire unacceptable. He should know that turning his back on members of the royal family is considered an insult to the crown. The young man grabbed his head and asked what kind of intrigue this was. Had she really decided to threaten him now? The girl replied that she had decided to warn him in advance, not to forget about manners, because next time the truth might accuse him of insulting the crown. After which she started to leave, and the guy asked in surprise if she was really just going to leave. Charlotte asked if there was anything left unsaid, as he already knew she was engaged to Duke Adler, so she asked him to get rid of the thought that she might still have any feelings for him. She then headed to one of the rooms, and noted that it was the last bedroom in the Count's residence on the second floor. Thanks to John's note, she was able to easily find the first victim's room. Suddenly, the girl sneezed sharply and came to the conclusion that it was definitely an allergic reaction. We need to get out of here quickly before the reaction starts to progress. Suddenly, the voice of a maid was heard from behind, asking who she was anyway. Our heroine is at a loss, because if word spreads that the princess is investigating a serial killer, it won't end well. Although it seems that this maid is not aware that she is a princess, we need to get out of here without creating suspicion. After which she exclaimed, "Does she really not know who the girl is? What kind of maids they recruit for the Moston residence? Is she responsible for this room? How does the maid clean it if the princess just came in here and she was covered in hives?" The maid bowed and asked for forgiveness. For this misunderstanding, she was very sorry. Most likely her hives are not due to dust, but to Peaches, the person who lived here, was always experimenting with them. They say that there was peach fluff in every crack of the furniture, and all the maids who cleaned here complained of hives. Our heroine was interested in this information, but it was not yet known whether it would help in her case. Now it is just a detail about one of the victims. Then she went on about her business and thought about the connection between Peaches and a serial killer. Suddenly, she heard an angry voice shouting that they had lost a lot of money. Who could have thought that Mr. Ian would run away with the money so shamelessly? Charlotte realized that these were the same girls from the cafe, but decided not to interfere until she heard that Lady Bloomer was a completely dishonest girl. Can they leave things like this when she has acted so treacherously towards her close friends? After this, our heroine entered the room and asked what they were doing there. One of the girls immediately exclaimed that it did not concern her. Our heroine asked in the sense that it was none of her business, since this girl would soon become a part of her family. The girl said that she was surprised by Bloomer's choice. It does not put her on the same level as other members of the Imperial family. Charlotte said that they ladies are so stupid that they fell for the scammer's tricks and lost all their money and are dragging others along with them. The aristocrats were indignant. How dare she talk to them like that, because she was clearly crossing the line. The princess countered that it should be her line, given how the three of them bullied each other. The girl objected that it was all Bloomer's fault. She had promised to invest money in this business, but she herself refused. The Duke's sister cried out that she had said she would think about it because it sounded strange. The lady stated that such devotion was hard to find. Did someone really teach her to be a migratory bird? The princess asked if she would take responsibility for her words, and if she really wanted to be accused of outrage against the imperial family. The girl clarified whether she mentioned the name of the princess. She is accused of insults, but in fact she said nothing about the imperial family. Our heroine headed towards the bottles of wine and asked if she really thought she could get away with it if she hadn't heard that, when the law fails, the fist will come to the rescue. After this screaming that she was sick, the girls disappeared from the room. Then the princess said that there was no need to think anything unnecessary, because she did not intend to beat them, she just wanted to scare them. The girl thanked her for her help and said that she was right, that the whole thing was a scam. Mr. Ian, who started all this, turned out to be a debtor of a huge amount. Our heroine replied that everything was fine, after which she accidentally dropped the bottle of wine from her hands. When asked if everything was okay, Charlotte replied that everything was fine. She just suddenly had no strength left in her arms. Suddenly, a young man appeared in the room and exclaimed what was going on here. What did she want to do to his sister? The girl tried to object that everything was not as it seemed, but the guy interrupted her and said that he saw the lady she was friends with run out of the room screaming. And he definitely heard something break, so he doesn't understand what else can be explained here when everything is already clear. Our heroine objected that he only heard sounds and misunderstood everything. Adler asked if she really wanted to feed him her lies again, since she had just admitted that she had broken the bottle. Does she really think he will believe her when he sees the room in such a state? There is no need to explain anything. He thought that something had changed in her, but it turned out that people do not change so quickly. The girl noted to herself that his eyes indicated that he would definitely not believe a single word she said, and perhaps would not even want to try to believe her. Since at the moment the young man looks as if he doesn't even want to hear her. She just wanted to help, perhaps the reason why the Duke will kill her is simple hatred for her. Suddenly, Watson's voice was heard stating that she was somehow early, as if she was dancing at all. When she replied that they were dancing, the guy said that, really, why should she dance? It's just spinning back and forth. He sees that the girl is returning without the Duke's escort. Let her wait a little and bring her carriage. Our heroine objected that it was already too dark, so they would go together. The guy remembered that Her Highness was afraid to be in the dark. If you leave her alone, she might ask you to save her from a rabbit in the bushes, so it's better to go together. Will the girl be able to walk on her own, or is it better to carry her in your arms? Charlotte climbed into his arms and said that she wanted to rest quickly, after which she asked if he was having a hard time. John replied that he thought that only her wrists were so weak, but she was generally like a feather. There was not a single strong spot in her body. Then he added that he wanted to say that the dress she tried on in the store suited her much better. After some time, Hadson asked if it was true that she would not write a letter to the Duke today, but she wrote to him every day had she really quarreled with him at the ball. Suddenly, John ran into the room screaming. The maid exclaimed, "Why scare him like that? What kind of bad manners is this?" Our heroine noted that she seemed to have said that she had no plans today, so she did not need protection. But the young man reported that today, at 5 in the morning, a fifth victim was discovered. Most likely she knows this man. The fifth victim was the detachment commander, Marquis Breget. The Adler family is distinguished by its position and wealth in the empire. Irenicus, by Diem Adler, inherited the best genes from his ideal parents and became an enviable groom. However, a great misfortune came to the ideal life. The servant reported that letters had arrived with a marriage proposal from a lady. When the guy said that they needed to be burned, the mother was outraged that he was even saying such a thing. She immediately told the doctor that he could go, then turned to her son and said that she was very concerned about the question of his marriage. Was there really no lady that he would like? The young man replied that now he was only concerned about the issue of her health, and marriage was secondary. Mother objected that she would still like to see his bride before her death. As a result, not a single wish came true. Neither the mother's nor the son's. The girl asked how they would now live without her. Suddenly, their father called out to them and said that this woman would become their new mother they met when he was at work. The young man was sure that they met when his mother was still healthy. The death of his mother, the dishonesty of his father, and the new mother, all these misfortunes led to the icing of Irenicus's heart. A few years later, his father also died, after which the boy's life ended, and his chapter as Duke Adler began, which was shrouded only in darkness. And so sometime later, the emperor asked when his mining concession there would end. Not this year had he by any chance seen his youngest daughter. He thought that they could get married. The guy thought to himself that they really wanted to set him up with this hysterical woman who wanted to marry Cillian, but he said out loud that it was a great honor for him. The young man could not resist the will of the emperor, despite the fact that he did not like the bride at all, after which he said that, in any case, this was a marriage of convenience, so they did not need to see each other, so they would see each other on the wedding day. They have no reason to see each other, but he noted to himself that he was getting married only to preserve his rights to own the mines. But suddenly, the girl said that she fell in love with him at first sight, so she would like to have a romantic relationship with him. The young man is disgusted by this marriage of convenience, and she shamelessly wants a relationship as well. If it weren't for these mines, he would have refused. The further their meetings with the worthless princess went, the more she fell in love with him. The girl said that she had already sorted out her past. Now she thinks only about the Duke. She will be the first and last woman for him. When the guy heard the answer to the question of what was so special about him, he was amazed. His fair hair shining like sunlight on a wheat field, deep clear eyes the color of a serene lake, smooth porcelain skin, a sharp nose like a sculpture, attractive lips. Since she likes the young man so much, it would be impolite not to reciprocate. Then he asked the servant if what he asked for was ready. He replied that he had gotten tickets for the opera, which is in greatest demand among young ladies. He bought premium class tickets, which cost 3 times more. Then our heroine said that it would be more pleasant for her to talk to him. Looking into his eyes, she was happy just to see his face. And when she fell asleep, the Duke noted that the girl was still the same woman, without a drop of etiquette and restraint. Adler will only tolerate this song and then remove her empty head from his shoulder. But when the fifth song had already passed, Irenicus thought that after all this was not a stranger to her, but a fiancé, so this should not violate the rules of chastity. Besides, she might not have gotten enough sleep and was tired because of him, as she said that she couldn't sleep remembering his face. If he wants to avoid such shame next time, he will need to set up a time for their meetings so that she can sleep peacefully. After this, every day, until Lady Mostyn's debut, was a disaster for the Duke. He thought about how her wink at their breakfast was so cute, why every time she remembered it, she became even more charming. And when the young man remembered all the compliments she had given him, it was as if he was struck by electricity. At some point, the young man began to realize that he had become dependent on Charlotte's praise each time it was like the first time. The letters have recently become more frank and bold. The girl wrote that her heart is burning, could they meet where it will be quiet, and there will be no one but them. Mostyn's debut, the guy replied that he was disgusted by such social events, so naturally he would not go anywhere. But then he quickly changed his mind and said that he would go, let him adjust his schedule to this event. The assistant was very surprised, and the young man thought that the princess would definitely want to go to this event with him as a couple. Then he asked Alfred what it meant when a girl said she wanted to meet somewhere alone. The young man replied that most likely she wanted some kind of secret meeting. When asked what it means when a girl says her heart is on fire, the assistant replied that he is a man with no experience in relationships, but believes that his friend needs to be prepared. A little later, the guy wondered if he was really that attractive. He couldn't concentrate on anything. He needed to meet her as soon as possible and find out what she was up to. If she wants to do something inappropriate, then you will need to firmly and definitely refuse her. But suddenly, the girl said that if he was busy, he might not be her partner for the debut. The young man was very surprised and asked if she hadn't said that she liked him. Our heroine replied that she would not like her beloved Duke to bother himself with matters that were unpleasant to him. The young man thought to himself that this was some kind of nonsense. She wanted to refuse to be his partner at this event, simply because he did not appear at them often. Therefore, he replied that he was going to attend the debut. If he could not do it with his fiancée as a partner, then his reputation would suffer. In order to avoid such incidents in the future, it seems we will have to be more active in various proposals. Unexpectedly, our heroine asked if it would be okay if she wore something with a deep neckline. The young man was so surprised by this question that he spat out the drink he was drinking. Sometime later, the guy said that he needed to buy a dress for the princess. She was his fiancée, so it wouldn't be strange to give it to her. The girl said that, frankly speaking, she just didn't have enough money to buy herself a new outfit. There is very little time left before his rights to the mines are renewed, so it would not be amiss to show his loyalty to the crown. The assistant did not understand how this was connected at all, but said that he understood everything would prepare the dress and send it as he ordered. The Duke expressed a desire to choose the dress himself, so he asked to see the design before purchasing. When he caught his eye on that very dress in the store, the saleswoman carefully asked for forgiveness for her insolence, but that dress had already been promised to another lady. The young man replied that he was buying it right now. The woman again said cautiously that undoubtedly his choice was for an impeccable dress. However, it was in reserve with the Viscount's daughter. The guy interrupted her and said that he seemed to have expressed himself clearly. She had not forgotten who he was. When the shop owner muttered that, of course not, the guy added that he would pay 3 times as much. This should be more than enough to also pay the penalty. Adler decided to give the princess this dress on the day of the meeting at breakfast. But an unexpected incident with food poisoning occurred. The palace was closed for some time, so it was not possible to meet her. He was very surprised that Charlotte became the main person in solving the crime. But moreover, the fact that in this confusion, the person she began to look for was him, made him feel surprisingly proud. On the day of the debutante ball, the young man was very pleased that he had given her a dress in which nothing extra was visible. However, he noticed that even without this, the princess attracted too much attention from men. It was necessary to buy something less conspicuous. Suddenly, the Marquis appeared, exclaiming that he had not thought he would meet the Duke at the debutante's ball, and also very much wanted to express his respects to the princess. Briege competed with him in everything, even at the military academy. He always didn't like this false friendliness. The young man declared that if he had only known that the girl had such a meek nature, he himself would have claimed her hand. The young man noted to himself that every word he said was like fingernails on glass, and the Marquise continued to say that he would like to take Adler away for a short time. Everyone was too interested in him. When our heroine answered that, of course, the guy was thinking about why she didn't refuse, since she had just recently said that she loved him. She could have at least slightly demonstrated her displeasure, and he would have stayed next to her. After they approached the other aristocrats, the Marquis declared that he had saved the Duke from the clutches of the most terrible woman in the empire. The guests noted that they did not think they would see Adler at the ball. One of the girls said that she had heard that the dress that the princess wore was taken from the Viscount's daughter. She immediately stated that she was so upset that she couldn't even sleep because she had been looking for a suitable dress for so long, and even left it in reserve. And the princess appeared out of nowhere and began to demand that they give her this dress. What could she do, since Charlotte was demanding it? She had to give in to her. Another guest noted that she was saying this only between them, but how shameless she was. She must be very offended. Suddenly, the young man interrupted them and asked where they heard the story about this dress. The lady replied that she had been in that store herself, and he would have been surprised too if he had been there, if he had heard the terrible words she had said to her. Suddenly, the young man interrupted her and asked if it was possible to believe in the veracity of what she said. The girl answered that of course the princess took this dress from her. Unexpectedly, the young man said that he had bought this dress, that he had personally gone to this store and purchased it completely shamelessly, and if his memory serves him right, he doesn't remember the lady being there at that moment. The Viscount's daughter immediately became nervous and replied that she had simply expressed herself incorrectly. In fact, she had heard about it from the store owner. The Duke interrupted her again and said that the owner of the shop could not have known for whom this dress was bought, since he had bought it alone and given it to the princess later. The Viscount's daughter certainly has talent. She came up with such a story just by seeing the dress on Charlotte, for which her reservation was cancelled. The girl exclaimed that in any case, the fact that she could not wear this dress because of the princess remains true. She is the victim in this situation. But Adler said that he knew that she had been paid a large sum of money as a penalty with which she could easily have bought herself another dress. If she is already going to lie, then at least let her do it truthfully. He warns that he will not tolerate any false information about his bride. The Marquise immediately stood up for her and said that apparently she was just slightly mistaken. The princess does not have a good reputation. She is known for the fact that every second word she says is a lie. The Duke retorted that it was not for the man who was engaged in the dirtiest deeds to judge her. The young man asked in the sense of dirty, does he really mean to say that the commander's deeds are considered dirty? Suddenly, they were interrupted by a girl who said that the Grand Duke Cillian had arrived and that they needed to greet him quickly. The young man wondered where the princess had gone. She couldn't have gone to meet him. One of the guys said that this duke, as usual, was in demand with the girls, after which he offered to drink as men should. The Marquis said that Cillian was so naive, he could have played with the girl who was clinging to him, but he always did nothing but refuse her, and didn't even lay a finger on her. Although you can't know for sure, perhaps he has already secretly had fun with her. Adler was starting to get annoyed by all this talk, so he asked if he thought he was crossing the line. The boys were wondering if he took her side, because she was his fiancée, but no matter what he did, the princess seemed to go for Cillian as usual. The young man threw the handkerchief to the Marquis and declared that he would have to answer for his words. On the way, he thought that this was simply disgusting. The guy definitely wouldn't have come here if the princess didn't want to. Unexpectedly, he came across Charlotte, who was talking about something with Cillian. The young man began to think that perhaps the reason for his rejection as a partner was that Cillian was also supposed to be present at the event. The girl said that she had already dealt with her past, and now thinks only about it, but she is known for the fact that every second word she says is a lie. Suddenly, there was a loud cry that Princess Charlotte had suddenly gone mad. The Duke noted that these were the ladies with whom his younger sister was friends. When he ran into that room, he saw that there was a broken bottle of wine lying on the floor. Moreover, his little sister looked scared, and there were tears in her eyes. This was the last straw, so Adler lost his temper and started yelling at her. When the princess left, the girl asked him if he had gone crazy. Why was he behaving like that with her? The brother exclaimed that they should not forget that they were not at home, so let him maintain formality. Bloomer explained that Charlotte helped her when she was being bullied, and that she dropped the bottle by accident. How could a young man behave like that without even hearing how it really was? The young man asked, dumbfounded, why she only said this now. The sister exclaimed that she tried, but how could she get in a single word when he began to pour out all his negativity on her? How could she even look the princess in the eye now? The guy immediately ran after her and thought that if he could at least go now and explain everything, ask for forgiveness for what happened, then maybe it would be possible to fix everything. But suddenly, some guy appeared, picked her up in his arms, and began to carry her away. The young man simply watched them go and understood that it was too late to do anything now. A few days later, the Duke was thinking about the fact that he was not receiving letters from Charlotte, which had been coming continuously until then. After their engagement, she wrote him letters every day without fail. Bloomer exclaimed that her brother was the stupidest man in the world. The princess was definitely offended by him, and if she were in her place, she would not even want to see him. The Duke muttered that they had originally intended to see each other only at the wedding, but added to himself that therefore it made no difference to him if she no longer liked him. It made no difference at all, absolutely. Suddenly, an assistant burst into the room and announced that a letter had arrived from the princess. The Duke pretended not to care and asked what all the fuss was about over one letter. But unexpectedly, the young man added that Charlotte is now under investigation. A few hours before, the princess was surprised that the criminal showed up 10 days later, when approximately the crime took place. The guy replied that it must have been early this morning, just like the previous 4 times the victim died of suffocation. So investigators believe that this is the work of a serial killer. When asked if they assumed that the killer was a strong man over 180 centimeters, the young man replied that yes. And besides, the Marquis himself was quite well built since he had received military training, so the criminal must have the same strength as him, if not more. Our heroine thought to herself she shouldn't stop her investigation because of some disheveled feelings. The guy continued to tell that the body was found in Norwood Alley. He knows this firsthand since he grew up there. It is not a place where aristocrats can go. These are the slums teeming with homeless people and criminals that are the dark side of the ideal empire. When asked where the victim's body was, the young man replied that it was most likely in the morgue. Then she asked whether it would be suspicious if Charlotte wanted to look at the victim's body. She noted to herself that usually the most important evidence of a murder is the body itself. This time, she absolutely had to find a worthwhile piece of evidence and see it with her own eyes. Watson replied that naturally this would arouse suspicion. Even he did not really understand why she suddenly needed to investigate this case. The girl replied that they had agreed that he would not ask the reason and help her, so he asked to keep his curiosity to himself. In any case, she definitely needs to check the body. The investigators have their own prison cells, don't they? The guy replied that, of course they do, but why would she need them? After some time, our heroine put on a wig and her maid's dress, which she took secretly, after which she asked if she looked like Charlotte. The young man replied that no one would think that a princess could walk down such a terrible alley. The girl said that he needed to watch her from afar. As soon as he saw that she was caught by investigators, he would need to follow them. John replied that, okay, how could he object? After which, the princess opened a bottle of red wine and began to drink it in one gulp. About half an hour later, the law enforcement officers were already telling her that she needed to stop leading such a lifestyle. And what kind of look did she have in broad daylight? So thin, but she drank so much alcohol and can barely stand on her feet. Hooliganism while intoxicated. A person who causes inconvenience to others by his inappropriate behavior or words while intoxicated is taken into custody and charged with hooliganism according to imperial law. Also, this arrest can be easily escaped if a small bail is provided. This is the most minor crime for which one can end up behind bars, so news of this will not reach the emperor. After which she screamed that, how could you lock a person up like that? She didn't want to sit there with the man. The man exclaimed that she was just some kind of infection. The girl will have no end of problems if she continues to drink until she passes out in such areas. Doesn't she know that a murder was committed there this morning? Our heroine exclaimed, is he joking or something? What murder? The law enforcement officer stated that she does not read the news at all. The victim's body is currently lying right in the next room in the morgue. The girl realized that it was very close and began to whine that she really wanted to go to the toilet. The man muttered that she was an annoying alcoholic. Charlotte exclaimed that he really wanted her to do this right here. The investigator told her to be patient. The girl screamed at him to immediately bring his boss here. Did he even know who she was? The princess had lunch with his boss yesterday and went to the sauna and drank tea in general. She did everything. Is he ready to take responsibility for her actions? She will do it right here. The man exclaimed that she is so nasty, just let her lower her dress. On the way, our heroine thought that she shouldn't underestimate her experience with 50,000 criminals. She then turned her attention to the doors that led to the morgue and noted to herself that it was good that it was quite close to the toilet. The law enforcement officer said that he needed to step away for a while on a murder case, so let her do her business and quietly return back. Let her not even think about running away before her confidant came for her. Our heroine noted that usually no problems are expected from drunk girls, so everyone is now busy with the murder case. When Charlotte looked at the Marquis's body, she immediately realized that it was not strangulation. If he had died from strangulation, there would have been traces of blood stagnation on his face. But his face is clean. There are no traces of resistance or self-defense. Does anyone really think that a person who received military training did not defend himself in any way? There are red marks in completely different places. This is a reaction to poisoning. He was poisoned, and then the cause of death was faked as strangulation. She doesn't know how developed the field of forensic medicine is here, but it is clear that the investigators were deceived by the criminal. Why does he fake the cause of death? Her thoughts were interrupted by the guard's voice, who asked if she had sobered up. Then he showed the box and said that this is what they killed the victims. They are very busy with this huge incident, so there is no time to babysit people like her, so let her sit quietly and sober up. After a while, the girl exclaimed why he couldn't be her confidant. Couldn't any person she knew free her for such a minor crime? The guy replied that things were different with him. After all, she had released him from prison early. The princess exclaimed that everything was lost. What should she do now? The young man asked if there was anyone who could free her. Charlotte wondered where such a person would come from. If the palace found out about this, the budget would be cut, or even taken away. But there was one who was not from the palace, and could free her, after which she said that she would need to send a letter. When the Duke appeared in prison, the princess noted that even his beads of sweat looked very cute. Breathing heavily, the young man asked what she was doing there. The girl replied that as he saw she was locked behind bars. Adler muttered that hooliganism in a drunken state. What's wrong with her hair? Is it a wig or something? Charlotte replied that girls sometimes have moments when they want to cause trouble. Can the young man free her, since he has already come, and keep the secret that she is a princess? Upon seeing the Duke, the guards were very surprised and asked what had brought him there. Our heroine thought to herself that in fact this man is the criminal that they are all so diligently looking for. What a strange situation. The investigation into a serial killer is in full swing, and at the station, his fiancée is accused of drinking alcohol and hooliganism, and he, the real criminal, has come here as a confidant of this fiancée. Usually, a criminal should be worried if he came to a place where his case is being investigated, but apparently the serial killer doesn't care about that. The guy said that everything was over, and he could go out. On the way, the girl thanked him and said that he was the only one who could help her. After all, he was her fiancé. Suddenly, the young man asked her if she was hurt, although the princess thought that he would start criticizing her again. When the princess replied that yes, the young man said that he had no other business today, so he suggested going on a date. Charlotte was surprised. What other date did he really want to go for a walk with a man who just left the police station? When asked if she remembered wanting to go to a certain restaurant, the girl replied that yes, they serve very tasty steaks there, and she usually cures her hangover with meat. The young man muttered that if she wanted, they would go there, but Charlotte noted that he seemed to have no desire to go there. The upscale restaurant Skolta is where the second murder took place, and the person killed was the chef, a great opportunity to find out how he is related to this person. In a restaurant, the waiter asked what degree of doneness he wanted. The Duke replied that it was well done. Done, the girl was indignant to herself that this was so disrespectful towards meat. The beef tastes best when there's a little blood in it, after which she said it would be medium rare. Suddenly, The young man asked why she decided to change her appearance and get drunk in that alley. The girl replied that she had heard that there was a popular establishment there, but she knew that if the princess was seen in a bad alley and also drinking, it would not end well. The young man asked why she decided to get drunk. Charlotte replied that every person accumulates stress, sometimes feels very bad and sorry for themselves, so they wanted to get drunk just to forget. Doesn't he have that? The Duke replied that he did not know he had never drunk to the point of intoxication. The girl stated that she was a little strange. Therefore, she asked for forgiveness for putting him in such an awkward position. Our heroine wanted to close this topic as soon as possible, but suddenly, the guy asked if the reason for her desire to forget was really because of him. The young man is very sorry about what happened on the day of Lady Mostyn's debut. Then, he made a big mistake and asks for forgiveness for having offended her through his carelessness. He also wants to thank her, albeit belatedly, for helping his little sister. Noticing that Adler was very uncomfortable, the girl exclaimed that Bloomer was his sister, so she was obliged to help her, because they would soon become a family. Hearing the word family, the young man coughed and turned red. Charlotte was truly disgusting to him throughout his life. Everything went the way he wanted. But with the princess, everything went exactly the opposite. The Duke's carriages, which were always ready for use, were occupied today by either his little sister or his stepmother. When the servant told him that he would have to wait about half an hour, the boy understood that he did not have that much time. He just wanted to look at that shameless face of the girl who was taken into custody. When the princess saw the guy, she said that even she found his sweat drops very cute. The princess was dressed in a commoner's outfit, and there was not a drop of makeup on her face. What an impossible girl! Why does she look so cute? He ran too fast and couldn't catch his breath, so his brain definitely can't function normally. What made him run here was the brand of a detained drunkard that was now on his bride. The assistant came to the conclusion that she could have done something of this that would have upset her greatly. Adler asked if a person no longer writes the letters she used to send every day, does that mean she wants to break up? The butler replied that usually girls who want to break up can change their hairstyle or become addicted to alcohol. So what did the Duke tell her? She definitely put on a wig and went drinking, because he behaved so stupidly at that ball, especially since the girl herself said that she sometimes feels very bad and sorry for herself, so she wanted to get drunk. Charlotte hurts herself because of him, after which she said that she made a huge mistake that day. The guy asks for forgiveness for having offended her through his carelessness. It was the first apology in his life, and the princess forgave him so easily, and he felt relieved. The relieved heart began to beat faster. Perhaps the girl was a person who could understand everything connected with him. Perhaps he could tell her everything that he had not shared with anyone, and that had tormented him throughout his life. After which, he said that, to be honest, he didn't want to come here. His memories of his last visit here weren't the best. The princess was surprised at what he meant. Did he really want to tell about the murder himself? The young man continued that 2 months ago, the chef decided to change the degree of doneness of his steak at his own discretion. He made it medium rare, saying that this is the only way to fully experience the taste of the meat. Our heroine thought to herself that this cook was too arrogant, but even so, this was not a reason to kill him. The young man suddenly added that it might seem funny, but he panics when he smells blood, and that included the steak that day, and he almost showed this unworthy side of himself to his sister and stepmother. Charlotte thought to herself, it can't be that a killer who graduated from the academy with honors would panic at the smell of blood. The Duke asked not to make such a pitiful face when his mother was dying. She was vomiting blood, and he was next to her after that day. Every time he smells blood, he remembers this picture, and it becomes difficult for him to breathe. This is the whole reason why he did not continue his studies at the academy. The guy could not join the army with such symptoms. The young man thought that perhaps his mother would be alive if he had stayed at home instead of going to the academy. His father had not looked after her well enough. The girl said that she was very sorry about what had happened. Did others know about it? But the Duke replied that he had not told anyone about it. Then she asked why he told her. The young man replied that he didn't know, maybe because they would soon become a family. Our heroine immediately called the waiter and asked to change the doneness of her steak to a better one. The guy objected that there was no need to change it because of him, since he couldn't smell it because of her plate, but the girl objected that today she wanted to eat well-done meat. The young man asked if she hadn't said that the meat didn't taste very good that way, but Charlotte said that meat couldn't be spoiled by the degree of doneness. Witnessing the death of parents is not an easy thing for any person, even if we are talking about the villain of this story. She persuaded her parents to go to an amusement park, and on the way there, in a car in which it was impossible to identify the bodies of the victims, only she remained safe and alive. If only the girl had not begged her parents to go to the park, they would have stayed alive. Every day she reproached herself with this and her thoughts. He must have spent his nights destroying himself, after which she said that everything that happened then was not his fault, so there was no need to blame himself. After some time before going to bed, our heroine thought that one should not be imbued with feelings for the subject of the investigation, but she consoled him without realizing it. Now her head is a mess. What is wrong with her? But that's not the point. Now it's necessary to analyze everything she learned at the station. The cause of the Marquis's death was not strangulation, but poisoning, in which case two assumptions arise. First, the bread killer and the serial killer are different people, and the evidence was falsified in order to pin this murder on the serial killer. Second, the evidence was falsified not only in the murder of the Marquise, but also in all the other victims before. The princess won't be able to examine the bodies of the previous victims, but she thinks the second theory is more likely, plus that knot was unique. The maids use a fairly simple method of tying knots for garbage, but that knot was fundamentally different from it. The probability that all the victims were killed by one person is high since all 5 nodes were identical. And if we think that the victims died from poisoning, and not from strangulation, the perpetrator does not necessarily have to be a large man, over 180 centimeters. A few days ago, she heard the testimony of the first victim from Bloomer. She said that this man was rather absent-minded in his work. So her brother fired her. She was very busy writing her scientific work. The stepmother was against this decision and asked to be understanding of her situation. Therefore, having learned about her fate, after she became the governess of Lady Mostyn, she was very sorry. The second justification was that the cook changed the degree of doneness at his own discretion. Both victims had a point of contact with the Duke and had once annoyed him. But could this really have been the reason for the murder? He is certainly quite cold, but he does not at all seem like a person who is capable of murder. Moreover, she learned the information that he was a murderer only from a short description of the work she found herself in. What if the guy is not a murderer, but just a suspect then, who is the real criminal? Some time later, the emperor said that last time they were unable to finish their meeting in a humane manner because of the attempted poisoning. So he was very glad that everything had finally been resolved, and they had all gathered together again, and now the meeting could begin. Our heroine noted to herself that Camilla looked as if she was planning something. Then it dawned on her that the Marquis of Dast had joined them today, and her sister had influence over him. When asked if he had anything to say, the boy replied that the emperor's mercy was boundless, and he would like to hear an opinion on one matter. Because they have had the problem of making some of the problems in their empire's justice system more difficult to solve in the last 10 years, the question arises as to what the consequences will be if they apply something to someone. Trumping legal terms, he turned to Princess Charlotte and asked her opinion on the matter. Our heroine was well versed in this topic, so she jumped up from her seat and muttered, "Where should she start?" After some time, the man coughed and said that he had nothing more to add. It was a very good answer. The emperor exclaimed that this was more than satisfactory. The princess had recently been staying in the library and studying. They had almost missed it. Our heroine replied that he was overestimating her, but she thought to herself that they had given her questions on her specialty on a platter. How could she not answer? Suddenly, a servant appeared and announced that this was a list of planned official events at court. His Majesty muttered that the time had already come for a meeting of the imperial religion. This is an assembly in which representatives of the mandate countries of the empire, represented by high-ranking officials, take part in order to perpetuate and confirm the friendship of their peoples. However, in reality, this is simply a way to show one's loyalty to the emperor and the empire to which these countries belong. The assistant added that due to recent events, they had excluded participants from Cortina from the list. The emperor replied that good this time, the event would be held more solemnly than ever, so that no other country would even dare to do something similar to the deeds of Cortina. The servant said that there was one more thing should they prepare for Princess Camilla's birthday party at the Imperial Palace this year as well. But His Majesty replied that no, this year let them spend it in the princess's palace. Charlotte's birthday at the Imperial Palace. The girl was extremely outraged by this, and she began to shout why her father was treating her like this. Our heroine didn't understand at all what had just happened. The birthdays of princes and princesses are usually held in their own palaces. However, the birthday of one of the emperor's children, whom he chooses, is usually held in the imperial palace for several years in a row. The choice fell on Camilla, and it seemed that she would be the heir to the throne. The last time there was an attempt at poisoning, Prince Philip said that if Charlotte had not suspected something was wrong, only Camilla would have remained alive among them and would have taken the throne. There was no direct evidence, but apparently these words were enough for the emperor to doubt his daughter. Her thoughts were interrupted by the voice of the Duke, who approached her, and said that today was the day of their meeting, and she had not forgotten about it. On the way, the girl thought about the fact that the Duke had started a conversation with her. However, she did not know at all what to talk to him about now, since she could not understand whether he was a murderer. The young man broke the silence, and did not say that it turns out she has very deep knowledge of the laws of the empire. Whether she studied this, Charlotte replied that this was her specialty. Suddenly, the guy asked her if she could be his partner at this ball. In honor of the meeting of the Imperial League, he really likes to take part in this event. Therefore, let her not worry that he might be uncomfortable participating in it. The princess wondered if he was really that hurt by the fact that she had told him last time that he might not be her partner, and then replied that she couldn't wait. When asked if she had anything else to say to him today, the girl replied that she didn't think so, but she thought to herself that this was happening to him today. The girl really didn't understand what was wrong. Maybe there were some words that she always said, but didn't say today. After which, she said that he had something on his cheek, it seemed to be his beauty. When the Duke blushed, Charlotte was surprised that he really wanted to hear a compliment from her. She was like a compliment machine for him now or something. Is it really possible to think that this shy guy standing in front of her is a serial killer? The Duke said that he had heard that her dress had been ruined on the day of her debut, and the girl replied that he need not worry about it as it was her mistake. The guy objected that it was damaged because she was helping his little sister, so he was simply obliged to compensate for the damage, for example, with a new dress that she would wear to the ball on the occasion of the meeting of the Imperial League. Our heroine replied that it was not worth it. They started to allocate her a larger budget, and besides, she still had the dress that she bought for her debut. The guy objected that high-ranking officials would be present at the league, so she was obliged to wear her best dress. When the girl asked if he meant that her dress might not be the best, the young man replied that he did not mean that, he simply thought that it would be nice if they bought her dresses in the best boutique in the empire. He made a huge mistake and can't live in peace when he owes someone. Charlotte noted that he has to see a lot of people, since he holds an important position, so most likely he would like to have a partner without flaws next to him. However, it is very difficult to book a visit to that boutique, unless you are a VIP client. After which she replied that she would go there with him, but she would pay. The young man replied that since this was her desire, he agreed. The princess stated that she knew it. He just wanted to pick out clothes for her so that they would match him. After some time, the maid exclaimed that she heard that she had made a reservation at the best boutique if her place at the meeting was determined exactly, and her birthday would also be held at the Imperial Palace. Her situation would change for the better. Finally, she'll be able to wipe her nose with that maid from Princess Camilla's palace. She heard out of the corner of her ear that it seems she failed to book an appointment at the boutique, so I bet she threw a tantrum. Suddenly, a voice was heard asking whether aristocrats always bought new clothes for every event. Hudson asked him to keep his useless remarks to himself, since the princess was there, but she added that she herself considered it excessive. She has so much to study before this huge event, and now she will have to spend at least a day choosing a dress. The maid reminded her that she must maintain her dignity, and the girl exclaimed, "What difference does it make? There is no one else but them." But then she turned her attention to John, who coughed and said that it was time for him to go and do the things she had given him, so he would come tomorrow when she had time. A little later, the guy said that it turns out that the last place where the Marquis was seen before his death was the debut ball. The princess said that she also ran into him that day. It can't be said that it was a pleasant meeting. It is said that a conflict broke out between him and Duke Adler that day. Whether she knew about this, our heroine answered that no, she did not know what happened after the Marquise took the Duke away with him. Lazio continued that no one saw the Marquise after that day, and as she herself knew, he was soon found dead. When asked why the nobleman was on that street, the assistant replied that it seemed he had gone there to meet with one of the human merchants who were based in that area. His hands were not clean, despite the fact that he hit the jackpot and became a commander. After joining the Imperial Army, the guy was a real villain to the people of Cortina, thanks to his terrible attitude towards them. Recently, rumors have been circulating that the Empire has begun selling captured children who were orphaned after the war. Our heroine was indignant. Couldn't the Empire do anything about this? The young man replied that of course it was prohibited by law, but one could not accuse a nobleman of such an act without strong evidence. Imperial law is cruel to commoners, after which he asked if she had managed to examine the corpse in the morgue that time. Charlotte was about to tell what she had learned, but then she stopped and said that she had simply looked around the morgue, and she knew that seeing a corpse would be too scary. I noted to myself that there was no need to reveal all my cards to him at the moment. His criminal record stated that John served in the army as an investigator and investigated the atrocities of the Marquis of Brage against the people of Cortina and reported them to his superior. However, the junior lieutenant ordered to close the case and forget about it. Watson began to speak out against it, so he pointed a gun at him. Seeing the threat, he decided to disarm the junior lieutenant. And in the end, everything ended in a trial with charges of assault on his superiors. The Marquis was the very man who had perjured himself at his trial, so Watson might well have held a grudge against him. The young man can be considered a suspect. No one can be trusted now. After some time, our heroine arrived at the boutique, and the owner said that it was a great honor for her. Duke Adler ordered that she be served with special attention, so let her show off her best dresses. The princess muttered whether they really had enough money. The maid replied that there was no turning back. She had to buy the dress, even if she had to cut the assistant's salary. A little later, Charlotte said that she would choose this dress, but she noted to herself that it was obvious that this was the most expensive dress here. Perhaps she should not have refused the Duke's offer to buy it for her. But when I took the receipt in my hands, I was very surprised the dress that they bought last time cost twice as much. So she muttered whether this was really the right price. It couldn't be that cheap. And she noted to herself that of course she wasn't an expert on dresses, but even for her, this price was strange. The owner exclaimed that how could he sell her the dress for a price lower than it actually was, when she herself was an interested party? It was the correct price, and therefore she could pay it. After the payback, our heroine understood that there was clearly something fishy here. When it suddenly started to rain, the maid exclaimed that the carriage needed to be brought to the entrance, but the girl replied that no, she just needed to call it, and they would run there. Suddenly, the guy stopped her and said that today, she would have to be on her feet all day, that if she caught a cold, she was completely weak. He will bring an umbrella now, so let him stand there and wait, and on the way, he will call a carriage. Charlotte objected that then he will get wet, but the young man replied that had she forgotten that he was a former soldier, some rain will not break him. The maid noted that sometimes he could be very rude, but he seemed quite kind. The princess agreed, and noted that she had chosen a good assistant for herself. Hadson added that there was no need to get attached to him. They didn't know what was going on inside him, and when she married the count, there wouldn't be a contract between them. The girl replied that she knew about it. The maid continued that she wondered if the price of the dress was really correct or not. Our heroine exclaimed that she also thought it was strange Adler must have set it all up. But suddenly, the voice of a young man was heard asking what he had already managed to do. Apparently, Her Highness speaks of him very often during his absence. The girl objected that, of course, not. She just wanted to say that, thanks to him, she was able to buy a dress today. The Duke noted that he was very glad that she had picked out an outfit for herself. Why was she standing here? Was she really waiting for it to end too? Charlotte explained that she was waiting for the carriage to arrive. And what was he doing here anyway? The young man replied that this building belonged to his family. He came here on business, and did not think that he would meet her here. The princess noted that, wow, what a surprise it was, such a coincidence to meet the person for whom he had reserved a visit to the boutique located in his building. Could he really be following her? No matter what thoughts she may have in his favor, he is still the prime suspect. No wonder if he is looking for the right moment to kill her. After which she exclaimed, "What a wonderful coincidence! Accidents are not accidental. They are definitely connected with fate." Suddenly, Alfred appeared saying that it was time to move on, and taking advantage of the opportunity, the Duke introduced them to each other. The girl thought that if this was his secretary, then he should know perfectly well what Adler was doing. Perhaps she could talk his ear off and get the information she needed out of him. Noticing that Charlotte was interested in the secretary, the Duke immediately nudged him and told him to go immediately and call the carriage. After which he asked if she had any business with him. The guy thought that she should have no reason to be interested in him. Our heroine exclaimed that in no case it just seemed that way to him. When asked what that look was, then the princess replied that she did not understand what he was talking about at all. Her gaze was always riveted on him. After this, the young man handed her an umbrella and said that it was time for him to go as he had urgent business. This gesture was very sweet, but our heroine's attention was drawn to the rope that hung on the umbrella. Meanwhile, the secretary was indignant that he was completely wet, and he had a meeting with the owner of the Imperial Bank. The young man objected that the fact that his jacket was a little wet would not ruin the business. And in general, doesn't it seem to him that he's been preening himself too much lately? Alfred exclaimed, in what sense actually, he changed his clothes twice just this morning. And regarding the boutique, he warned the saleswoman to take only 10% of the cost of the dress from the princess, and the Duke would pay the rest. And he also asked her to say that this was the real price of the dress. Adler added that he hoped that he had also conveyed the words about her not selling dresses to anyone else in the empire. The assistant replied that of course, but now they would not receive rent from her for a whole year. The young man thought to himself that the most important thing was that the princess believed that she had paid for the dress herself. The girl said that this was a wonderful coincidence. Accidents are not accidental. They are definitely connected with fate. And now only Princess Charlotte will be in a dress from the best boutique of the empire at the ball. Meanwhile, John came running and said that there were no good umbrellas in any of the stores, apparently, because the rain had started. Suddenly, everyone went to buy them. But suddenly, the guy saw that the princess had it in her hands and asked where they got it. Hadson explained that they had just accidentally met the Duke, who of course gave his umbrella to the princess. How caring he is! The young man muttered that he was so caring that he even created such an accident. The princess thanked him for the umbrella and said that since she already had one, she should take it for herself, otherwise she was completely wet. The young man objected. Why did he need it now, since he was already soaking wet? And let him give it to him, so that he can hold it when he leads her to the carriage. A few days later, it finally happened. Our heroine managed to catch a cold in the summer. A weak body is one problem, but apparently that rope was too much of a shock for her. However, it is unlikely that the Count personally tied this umbrella with that rope. And then our heroine realized why she suddenly started looking for excuses for the young man. Did she really want his innocence inside? He has shown her his humanity several times, but that doesn't change the fact that he is now the prime suspect. The maid exclaimed that Her Highness had a very high temperature, something had to be done. The girl asked whether she had sent a message about the cancellation of the tea party at the Duke's younger sister's. The assistant replied that of course she should not worry about it. Suddenly, another maid announced that guests had come to see the princess. Hadson replied that Her Highness had cancelled all her plans. Who was it now she would send them back? But suddenly, the second housekeeper said that it was Count Adler. Charlotte exclaimed that it couldn't be. She hadn't even told anyone that she was ill. After some time, a young man appeared in the bedroom and greeted the princess, after which he noticed how she looked and froze with his mouth open. Not paying attention to this, the girl asked for forgiveness for meeting him in such a shabby state. The young man said that she had nothing to apologize for. On the contrary, he should apologize for his rudeness in entering the chambers of a noble lady without an invitation. He would like to clear up any misunderstandings in advance, as he is a gentleman and has never entered the girl's private chambers. Our heroine replied that she knows she doesn't particularly care who enters her chambers. The young man felt as if he had been struck by electricity, and he muttered that someone else had really come in here. But Charlotte did not hear this, and said that today was not even the day of their meeting which brought him to her. Then she coughed and added that it was just a cold that would soon pass. So had he come to her to say something? Suddenly, the Duke announced that he had come for the umbrella he had lent her last time. To the surprised question of whether he had really come here just for this, the guy replied that this umbrella was very dear to him. The girl realized that this was just an excuse. Did he really want to say that he really came here for some umbrella, judging by the way he was looking at the room all this time? He came here to make inquiries about the princess. Criminals always choose the place for the murder in advance. After which she said that the umbrella was there, she should have returned it herself. But since it was here, then let her take it. Suddenly, Adler asked why she hadn't written to him lately. The princess replied that he had planned the dates of their meetings, so she thought that he would get tired of constantly receiving letters from her. But the Duke replied that he would not get tired of them, moreover he was waiting for them. If she had informed him of her illness in advance, by means of a letter, such a curious situation would not have arisen. Our heroine muttered that she understood, and would let him know next time, but she noted to herself that he had shifted all the blame onto her, after which she started coughing heavily, and said not to come close, otherwise he might get infected. But the Duke came up to her, and said that she couldn't get infected just by standing next to her, only through closer contact, such as when she wouldn't care that he was in the room. After which, he removed a piece of paper from her hair, and said that a napkin was stuck to it. The girl did not understand what kind of look it was. Was there really malice in the eyes? This was the princess's palace, which meant there were many witnesses. He would not kill her now. Adler stated that her body is very weak. You don't even have to squeeze her wrist to break it. Her pulse seems too fast. He heard that a cold goes away if you infect someone. The young man believes that he can do this as her fiancé, after which he begins to lean towards her in order to kiss her. But suddenly, the voice of the maid was heard, who said that she had brought them tea. Did the princess even see what a beautiful bouquet the Duke brought her? The guy immediately said that he simply took with him flowers that the gardeners had picked in his garden. In general, it seems that they have already finished with everything, so it is time for him to go, since there is a lot to do. Let him be careful. Charlotte noted to herself that it was very strange to hear her killer say that she needed to be careful, after which she shouted after him that he had forgotten his umbrella, but there was no trace of him. After which she stated that she knew he had not come for an umbrella, after which she told the maid to take the flowers to the living room. She noted to herself that even among flowers there are poisonous ones, especially these bright flowers, who knows, maybe they are intended to kill her. The princess was just thinking that she could finally rest when she heard someone come into the bedroom. It was John, who stated that she was sick. After all, he was the one who told her. A few hours ago at the Duke's estate, he was informed that Charlotte was ill. The sister added that she had caught a cold and had received news that their tea party was cancelled. The young man did not raise why she told Bloomer the whole truth, but did not convey any news to him, but said that she had fallen in love. The younger one continued, "What is he even going to do? She is his fiancée. He should at least give her a bouquet of flowers and visit her." The guy replied that it's very inappropriate to show up in a girl's room without an invitation. Bloomer was indignant. How can he not know such elementary things about girls? When a girl is sick, she is having a hard time mentally, and she is waiting for her beloved to come to her. Let him go and get infected from her. They say that a cold goes away if you infect someone. The Duke replied that he would think about it, as he would coordinate his schedule with Alfred. But it would not be easy, and he noted to himself that he would have to reschedule his plans. Besides, the meeting was not scheduled. The princess could misunderstand everything. It would be difficult if she mistakenly assumed that he liked her. But a few hours later, a young man with a bouquet of flowers was already near her palace. He thought that he was her fiancé after all, which meant he could see his bride without any reason. Then he wanted to kiss her in order to catch her cold, but the maid interrupted them. Then, already behind the door, the guy thought that he had completely gone crazy. Not only that he had entered her chambers without an invitation, but also this. Plus, he also encountered Watson, who greeted him. Adler noted to himself that this was the same guy who had taken the princess that day. He had bumped into him a couple of times in military school, and he seemed to have some remarkable abilities, despite his lowly origins. It turns out that he is the same person who enters Princess Charlotte's chambers. When asked what he was doing, their John replied that he was responsible for the safety of Her Highness. When the Duke asked him if he often came there, the boy replied that at least more often than his lordship. Adler replied that everything was clear to him, and added that he expected him to work until he lost his pulse, if the protection and safety of his fiancée required it. The princess asked if he had found out anything new. The guy objected that she was sick. Was that really what she was most concerned about now? The girl retorted that he was only coming to report to her. When asked if he couldn't just visit her, as if she were sick, the girl replied that if he really wanted to visit a sick person, usually flowers or fruit would be included with such a visit, and not such a red tape of paperwork. The young man said that this was information about the third victim's bakery. There was an accounting book and data on the activities. It is known that the owner of the bakery was a very good-natured person. He was involved in charity-distributed free bread to poor families, and on the day of the incident, he was on his way to distribute bread. The princess thanked him and said that as soon as she learned something new, she immediately felt better, after which she sneezed loudly. Watson noted that if she got sick because of such a light rain, then she would be better off taking care of her health, not the investigation. Charlotte was indignant that she had not yet heard moralizing from him. Please let him put these papers on the table when he leaves. But suddenly, they all started to fall to the floor. The young man was surprised how it was possible not to hold a couple of pieces of paper in her hands. There was no strength in her. He would collect them and put them on the table so that she could look at them later, so let her not bother herself. The girl suddenly noticed that the papers were tied with a rope and froze in surprise. The outstanding abilities of a commoner and a person from a poor family can also become a curse for him. The closer success was to his hands, the more it was out of his reach, for despite all his achievements, the aristocracy was one step ahead of him. There were so few commoners in the military academy that they could be counted on the fingers of one hand, and besides, the young aristocrats always despised them and exclaimed what aristocrat would want to receive orders from a commoner. Therefore, they were content with the lowest ranks, since for them, even this was a luxury. And in this difficult position, all he saw was lawlessness, the immorality and permissiveness of the officers in the mandated lands, which was conditioned by their imperial rank as warriors, as well as the cartel aristocrat, who knew about this perfectly well but simply turned a blind eye. While the one who, for the sake of justice, went against this and declared a protest, ended up behind bars. Although the unjust orders came from the aristocrats, and they were the only ones to blame, only the commoner, John, was declared a criminal. He was demoted and branded as a criminal. And the one who extended a helping hand to him was Princess Charlotte, the stalker of Duke Cillian, stupid and arrogant. You only have to meet her gaze, and she will leave no living place of you. At their first meeting, the princess made a surprising offer. She wanted to buy his loyalty. She declared that he had been treated unfairly, and she was the only aristocrat in the entire empire who said such a thing. The young man believed that she was clearly up to something. If he got involved with her, he would definitely get into something. However, it was too tempting an offer to refuse, so he decided that he could sell his return even if it was a fake one. However, contrary to rumors, the princess turned out to be insightful and simple-hearted, and she also had a certain charm. Another thing that was different from the rumors was her love for Duke Cillian, which was actually directed towards Duke Adler, Irenicus von dem Adler, he who was as inaccessible to the common man as the sky. It seems that on that day, at Lady Mostyn's ball, Adler treated her as coldly as Cillian, for the appearance in which she appeared at the ball was rather desolate. The familiar feeling of helplessness all he could offer was useless consolation, and yet he told her that the dress she tried on in the store suited her much better. With these words, he wanted to say that the princess should not be offended by cold and callous men who are not even suitable for her. Seeing the frightened look of Her Highness, the guy asked what happened if everything was okay with her. The princess muttered that the knot tied on the papers was rather unusual. The guy replied that yes, you don't often see it in the Empire. Such knots are usually tied in Courtine. He is very reliable. That is why he took root in the army. He got used to using this method back in the academy after training there. It becomes a matter of habit. Did he really surprise her that much? The princess replied that it simply resembled the one used by the criminal on his victims. The young man was indignant, wondering if she wanted to say that she now suspected him of involvement in the murders. How could she, since he was working so hard to solve these crimes? Charlotte muttered that she had only thought about the possibility for a second, but she noted to herself that if she thought about it, he couldn't be the killer, firstly. At the time the first victims appeared, he was exiled to Courtine. The young man was not reassured that in such a case, Absolutely all the students of the academy could be suspected, plus the Duke's umbrella was tied in exactly the same knot. How polite he is, because people who have not been trained at the academy will not be able to untie him. Then it dawned on him that up until that very moment, her main suspect had been Duke Adler. Did she start to suspect him after the engagement? And has she really just been watching him all this time? The girl replied that he is also a man over 180 centimeters tall who has undergone military training, and besides, he is connected to all the victims in one way or another. When asked if that was why she had ordered them to find out about him, Charlotte replied that she had to find out whether he was a murderer or not before the wedding. The guy grabbed his head and said that only she could suspect Duke Adler of these crimes. The girl replied that that was why she hid it. He could help her conduct the investigation after all that was their agreement. The young man asked her why she told him all this. The girl answered because she trusts him, and he is very reliable, but she noted to herself that despite the fact that she literally bought him out, John is helping her investigation from the bottom of his heart. The young man decided to clarify what made her think of him that way. The princess replied that he would not leave her to get wet in the rain. When the young man stated that it turned out that she did not love Duke Adler, our heroine suddenly began to cough, after which she added that she was not so carefree as to fall in love with a murder suspect. Watson replied that okay. In any case, all that was required of him was help in finding the real serial killer, and if it turned out to be Adler, then it was necessary to find out before the wedding. Since she bought him for a considerable price, he must repay her accordingly. He will help her until exhaustion. When the girl said that there was no need to overdo it for her, the young man retorted that if anyone had to work to the point of exhaustion, it certainly wasn't her. He was stronger and more resilient, so he would recover faster. Our heroine thought to herself that perhaps she had relaxed too much, but she began to feel very sleepy. Therefore, she said that it was better for her to rest, so that the strong and resilient John could go already. The young man covered her and replied that, well, let her recover, and he would do the hard work. A few days later, the princess read information about the third victim from the bakery. This bakery was popular among the common people and had very tasty bread. The owner helped the poor and was very kind. Duke Adler has no connection with this woman, and among the bakery's clients, there could not have been anyone connected with the aristocracy, since these were ordinary schools or canteens. However, the bakery's sales are not small, no matter how popular it is. How can the income be so great? Besides, the expenses compared to the income are not so much what does all this mean? Somehow too suspicious, since she has the bakery's account book in her hands, then perhaps she will find out something. Suddenly, a maid appeared and announced that the Duke had set a date for their meeting. In the letter, the young man indicated that she could choose the meeting place on a certain date herself. Our heroine came to the conclusion that this was an excellent opportunity to examine the crime scene. The maid said that it was summer now, so they could organize a refreshing date on a yacht, or she wanted to go to the theater. Charlotte replied that she didn't know, maybe she should try something new. For example, to see how ordinary people live. Hadson asked in surprise what she meant, but the princess looked at her seriously and said that for this date she would need her clothes. When the Duke learned that she wanted to visit Baker Street, he said that he didn't remember there being any interesting places there. What did she plan to do there? The girl noted to herself that there were many interesting places there, because the main clientele of the bakery lived there. After which she said that she heard from a friend of hers who lives on that street that it is very interesting there. After Adler asked in surprise that she really had friends among the common people, the girl realized that Hadson had meant it, and noted to herself that she had no friends at all, even among the aristocrats. The young man said that if she was on such warm and friendly terms with her maid, did that mean that she was also friends with her guard? But the princess replied that she was only friends with her maid. The Duke asked if she could not visit this street with her and go with him to some other more pleasant place. Our heroine exclaimed, "What's the problem she wants to go with him?" The Duke replied that, okay, then he would ask his assistant to book them a restaurant. For later, the girl objected that she would like to take a walk like ordinary people, without security and without secretaries. When they entered the store, the man immediately stated that they had clearly entered the wrong door, but Charlotte exclaimed that no, they had come to the right place and wanted to buy him something less attention-grabbing. The guy asked if he really needed to buy different clothes. The princess replied that of course his lordship was now too dazzlingly brilliant, so he would definitely stand out on the street. The seller immediately offered them several options of nondescript clothing. The young man muttered that it was the first time he was wearing government uniform. When he went to change, the salesperson's exclamations about his firm chest and beautiful snow-white skin could be heard from the fitting room. The princess stated that, as expected, he combined a cold, handsome face and a flawless body. After the Duke appeared and asked if all government clothing was so uncomfortable, Charlotte froze in surprise. The seller said that even such clothes looked great on his flawless body. The girl exclaimed that at first glance she understood that it suited him very well. It did not seem to him that a pleasant aroma was coming from somewhere. It was the smell of love, her love for the Duke. She noted to herself that she almost blurted out that she fell in love with him at first sight. Although she had told him these words countless times, so why couldn't she today? When the shop assistant asked if the Duke would buy this outfit, the young man said that he would buy everything in the store, but it would still be about the same as if he bought a couple of suits for himself. After this, he asked if they were now ready for a walk along Baker Street. Charlotte said his hair color would be a showstopper, so let him wear that hat, please. But the young man put a cap on her head and said that if anyone's hair color was going to catch the eye, it would be hers. On the way, the young man asked her if she had already decided where they were going now. Our heroine pointed her finger somewhere to the side and said that she wanted to go to that restaurant. This is the bakery's largest customer. If you believe the accounting records, since they've been buying baked goods there for quite some time, then it's worth starting your investigation there. Charlotte ordered one portion of the well-done meat dish, one basket of bread, and one chocolate cake. The guy said that he thought that even at the military academy, the atmosphere was more pleasant than here. The girl asked if he wasn't having fun here. Adler replied that the princess must be more unfamiliar with this place than he was. Our heroine said that she would tell him something. In confidence, she secretly left the palace and walked around such places. Does he remember how she got drunk on Nouveau Street? When their order was brought to them, the princess noted that it was some other bread. The waiter noted that apparently she had not been there for a long time since they had to change the supplier of baked goods. An accident happened to the owner of the bakery that supplied them with baked goods. It's a shame because he was a good man. Our heroine exclaimed what a pity, and the Tory became sweeter before they were not so cloying and tasty. The waitress objected that in fact, the cake she was eating right now was less sweet than the one from the previous supplier. The desserts of that bakery were a real delight and a paradise for those with a sweet tooth. They seemed to be addictive and bewitching. The most popular was the vanilla bun with custard. The Duke noted that she was quite knowledgeable about the baked goods from that shop. Had she ever been there? The girl replied that Hadson had recommended that shop and asked him to be sure to bring her some buns from there. When asked if he had heard of him, Adler replied that such things did not particularly concern him, so he was not interested. The young man believes that even a princess does not necessarily need to be interested in such things. Charlotte replied that perhaps so. But when she entered his family and was in charge of the house, it would be better for her to know more about the household. Didn't he think so? When the boy started coughing, the princess did not understand why he was embarrassed. Or was it because she would not have time to become the mistress of his house, since she would die first? After which she asked if she would be doing housework when they got married. The young man muttered that his stepmother was doing it now, but he thought they would resolve the issue. The princess said that she expected a lot from this bakery, but unfortunately, the guy has already died. It's a pity. I wonder what happened to him. Did he drown or something? The young man replied that if she was so interested, they could go and find out the details. Charlotte noted to herself that he had a completely different reaction than last time, which meant that he didn't know anything. Then she took a piece of chocolate cake and said that he simply had to try it. While the Duke was indignant about this childish prank, the princess told him to open his mouth and muttered that an airplane was flying. In the end, Adler had to try it, and he said that it was indeed very sweet, just like she said. The girl thought to herself that the basis of conjecture is a way to extract information from the interlocutor based only on a couple of known facts. If you asked someone a question and the person began to defend himself, the reason is that the interlocutor suspects that the motive of your question is unclean. On the other hand, every person likes to feel smarter by teaching others. If during a conversation you intentionally omit some details or convey them falsely, then the interlocutor having the information will correct you and add more details. A feeling of incompleteness when studying the ledger, it arose from the absence of an entry for the purchase of sugar and flavorings. It is impossible to imagine a bakery without these ingredients. This was noticeable due to the disproportion of income and expenses. She thought that maybe the pastries were really made without sugar, so she secretly asked the waitress about it. But it turned out that the pastries were even sweeter, and the vanilla bun with cream was a bestseller. So there were contradictions. But the Duke did not fall for her questioning tactics. Even though she made many mistakes in describing the victim, she masterfully wriggles out of it, or she really doesn't know. Adler asked why she was looking at him, like that was there something on her face or something. The princess replied that, yes, sheer charm. It seems he is not a big fan of sweets. The young man replied that yes. The girl said that she herself has a sweet tooth, but it seems that sugar is expensive in their country. Adler replied that she was right. The rights to sell and produce sugar, as well as the rights to extract minerals, were monopolized, and the imperial court sold them to the nobles. The rights to sugar were owned by the family of the Marquis of Dost, and also the family of the Empress. It dawned on our heroine that the Dost family is the fourth victim of the serial killer, namely the Marquis's secretary. I wonder if there is something that connects them. After some time, the Duke asked where they had come. The girl explained that it was a new establishment that had appeared on the site of the bakery. Since she had come to these parts, she had to visit there, after which she ordered 2 glasses of whiskey. Adler tried to stop her and told her that she couldn't get drunk and rowdy again. Charlotte replied that she would be careful today and try to stay out of jail. Then she asked the guy if he had received the place that had previously belonged to the bakery. He replied that yes, but it was a pity since the owner had been engaged in baking for a long time. The princess stated that he apparently had no family since the bakery had closed. The young man replied that yes, he had lived alone for a long time, since he was not a local. It was not exactly known where he was from, but he was very kind. Suddenly, a cry reached them. What should they do now because the man had debts twice as big as he had before? The owner immediately said that there was no need to pay attention to them because they were usurers. They always incite debtors to play, saying that they will forgive their debt, but in the end, their debt always doubles. He would like to throw them out, but he lacks the courage. Suddenly, one of them turned dismissively to our heroine and asked why she was staring at them and that she should lower her eyes immediately. The seller immediately began to try to calm him down and said that he simply misunderstood everything. But the man did not calm down and said that the little girl had completely lost her fear, after which he even swung at her. Our heroine noted to herself that apparently, because of their clothes, he thinks that they are ordinary people. Perhaps it is worth getting it from him once, so that later his life will not seem like a bed of roses, but it will hurt, of course. Many a knight grabbed him sharply by the hand and muttered that he was so stupid that he was going to raise his hand against a well-bred girl. Another young man grabbed him by the shirt and exclaimed, "Why is he interfering at all? Why is he waving his arms?" Without thinking twice, the young man grabbed it and threw it over his shoulder. His buddies shouted what kind of infection they had come across and rushed to attack. Watching how the Duke deftly dealt with the offenders, the girl thought that the time at the academy was not wasted. After a short period of time, it actually began to look more like a beating than a fight. The owner decided to intervene in the fight and asked them to stop. Why don't they settle it like men properly according to all the rules? In a one-on-one fight. After some time, the boys got ready to play cards. Our heroine thought that he would refuse, perhaps he was drunk from the whiskey, but okay, let it be so. After which she exclaimed what he was doing. Since he would lose, the guy replied that playing cards at the academy was a kind of punishment. Charlotte was indignant that he had just lost his watch. At this rate, he would return home in his underwear, if he was lucky. Meanwhile, the opponent declared that he had a straight and his friend had nothing left except his clothes. The Duke asked if she had anything to put on the table. The girl thought to herself that she was losing so badly and still wanted to continue, and her facial expression was exactly the same as that of the gamblers she worked with. After which, she told him to step aside and stated that they were changing the player. After a short period of time, our heroine had a full house, so she said that she could take this watch. To the young man's surprised question about how she managed to do this, our heroine replied that one could say that it was in her training program. She noted to herself that she learned this from an inveterate gambler when she was investigating a case of an illegal gambling house. In order not to arouse suspicion in a gambling house, it is not enough to simply be elusive and secretive. You need to infiltrate their company and investigate the matter from the inside. After which, she stated that she wanted to put everything she had earned on this game, and if they didn't want to, she wouldn't force them. But the guys replied that they would make a double bet. Our heroine replied that if so, why don't they put that contract in place too? The man replied that he agreed. He would bet everything free him from debts if she won. But she understood what would happen if she lost. She would have to pay with her body if she could not pay for everything. Then he laid out cards of the same suit on the table and said that she should calm down. It was not proper for a young girl to behave like that. But the rivals rejoiced too early because our heroine had Royal Street Plus, after which she stated that the uncles should tone down their ardor. It is not appropriate for adults to behave like that. After some time giving the contract, Charlotte said that it would be better for him not to get involved with loan sharks. This is a release of the debt obligation. The man said that he himself did not want all this, but he had no choice because his child was sick. Our heroine handed him the jewelry and said that she didn't know how much it cost, but let him buy medicine with it. After all, the absence of debt doesn't mean the appearance of money. The man burst into tears and said that he didn't understand how this was possible because he was seeing her for the first time, and she was so kind to him, thank her very much. He would definitely repay her for her kindness. Let him just say his name. But the girl replied that it was okay. It would be enough for her if he just lived happily, and it was time for them to go. On the way, the guy asked if she had always been so unceremonious. She just helped that man and his sister. She had absolutely no benefit from it. Charlotte thought to herself that yes, she had no benefit from it in her past life. She had always been surrounded by scenes of injustice, after which she said that she asks for forgiveness, that because of her today, he saw so much that was inappropriate. If this is unbearable for him, then it will not happen again. But the young man objected that he did not say that it was unbearable for him. Thanks to her, there were also pleasant moments. It was the first time the young man had seen anyone shuffle the cards so quickly. The princess said that hands are usually faster than eyes, and she was so afraid that she behaved inappropriately again. The Duke objected that, on the contrary, he liked it. Suddenly, the guy hugged her tightly, and when she asked in surprise what had happened, he explained that someone was following them. The girl suggested that these were the people from the tavern. The guy replied that it would be good if it were them. However, if it was someone who knew their identities, then this would definitely create problems for them. Taking out his pistol, the young man added that he hoped there would be no need for bloodshed. When asked how long he had been carrying it with him, the Duke asked if she really thought that he would walk with her carefree through these streets without a weapon. Then he said that they would now have to run a little. Was she ready for that? After which, they suddenly began to run quickly, trying to break away from the attacker. After some time, the one who was watching them could not understand where they had gone. It turned out that the young man had suddenly pulled her around the corner and pressed her to himself so that she would not make a sound. Suddenly, they heard the voice of their pursuer exclaiming that it would be the end for that man if he failed. Then he looked around the very corner, where the boys were standing, and saw them. Adler reacted very quickly and immediately struck him with the handle of the pistol. Examining him, the Duke stated that he had a dagger. Would the princess recognize it? Charlotte began to be indignant about who he took her for, but suddenly Adler covered her mouth with his hand and told her to stop. The guy said he heard a sound like several people were coming here. Maybe he will have to use the weapon for its intended purpose. Without thinking twice, the princess picked up some kind of stick for self-defense. The young man thanked her for her initiative, but told her to be careful and not to get hurt. As the young man pointed his weapon at the approaching people, the familiar voice of Alfred was heard, who exclaimed in fear, "His lordship." "What is going on?" the owner himself asked to follow them, and they disappeared so suddenly into the street that they did not have time to come to their senses. The Duke explained that there was a tail behind them. It is not clear whether it was a killer or not. We need to take him with us and interrogate him. The princess asked if he had asked Alfred to follow them. The guy replied that he had, and she had no awareness of her position and title at all. Our heroine dejectedly replied that she really hadn't even thought about it. The Duke replied that it was nothing to worry about, but it was fun, and it would probably have been even more fun if he had seen her waving her stick. After the interrogation, which did not really lead to anything special, They were faced with busy days of preparation for the meeting of the League of the Empire. Our heroine believed that she would die faster than learn the history of all countries and their representatives. At least she has experience passing state exams. When she bumped into John, she was surprised that he had been waiting here all this time, since it was so hot outside. The guy replied that there were many shady places around. It is not at all difficult for a young man to wait for Her Highness. Charlotte exclaimed that she had good news. The personal guards would not be allowed to enter the building due to the security regulations of the Imperial Palace, so he could not come tomorrow and have a good rest. The young man was indignant, asking who would guard her. The girl replied that the Emperor's palace had its own guards. The young man looked upset and asked if Duke Adler would be her partner tomorrow. The princess replied that of course, who else? Watson exclaimed that she had absolutely no sense of self-preservation. She herself said that she was followed when she was with him. She did not know for sure who it was. Charlotte objected that even so, she would not be able to get him into the Emperor's palace. The guy objected that she could at least protect herself from the murder suspect. The girl replied that only by being near him could she find evidence. The young man did not understand why she should expose herself to danger and find this evidence. Our heroine didn't know what to answer to this. She couldn't say that she was one of this killer's victims, and if she didn't find him, her death would be inevitable. After which she said that the princess cannot distance herself from her fiancé without a reason. A short time later, the day arrived for the ball to be held in honor of the meeting of the Imperial League. The maid admired how beautiful our heroine was. She knew that this dress would suit her, and she was very glad that after so much time they were able to prepare the best dress for her. The princess thanked her and thought to herself that of course they could not calmly choose a good dress, because before she had arranged prices in salons that she was even thrown out of there, after which she muttered that it seemed the Duke was going to come to the palace. Seeing her off, Hadson said that yes, he had been busy since the morning, but he still decided to pick her up from the palace himself and go with her. At the sight of the Duke, the princess froze for a second and thought that, of course, a man whose beauty could light 1,000,000 hearts would look exactly like this. After which she said that even today he looks simply flawless and incomparable. The young man replied that he could say the same about her. This dress suits her very well. The girl replied that it was all thanks to him. He paid for it, no matter what. She thought she couldn't find another explanation for such a low price. Adler said that he didn't understand what she meant. The princess said that she had no intention of protesting against this. She simply wanted to thank him. The young man objected that if she were to thank him, it would not be him but the boutique. Then she asked if there had been any problems during this time. The girl replied that perhaps only the hustle and bustle of preparing for the ball. Irenicus reported that he had found out the identity of the man who had pursued them that time. This was Prince Frederick's man. In addition to his meager fighting skills, he also turned out to be talkative. They did not even begin to torture him, as he himself revealed that he was the one who sent him. Our heroine thoughtfully muttered what information he wanted to find out from them. She noted to herself that she knew that the prince did not have the most positive feelings for her. Every tea party made it clear that this was the case. Since the guy had switched to surveillance, it meant that he had decided to find her weaknesses. After which she stated that it was not an attack, but surveillance, since the man had a weapon with him, but did not use it against them. He would have received a big punishment anyway, since he is dealing with the royal family, so if he wanted to harm, he would have definitely done it, but not like this. The young man replied that she was right. Frederick wanted to gather useful information about her. Since they had received his confession, she could make this truth public in the imperial palace. Our heroine was surprised that he really wanted her to reveal the prince. The guy replied that yes, it would also help her in many ways. He will testify himself, so she need not worry about the emperor's reaction. In the palace, espionage is a fairly common practice. If Charlotte reports on him now, when she has not suffered at all, then the prince will also not suffer punishment. On the contrary, she could trip herself up, since it would also be made public that she had walked the streets of the common people and brought shame on the imperial family. So she replied that it was not necessary, no one was hurt. There was no point in complicating matters unnecessarily. The Duke replied that if she thought so, then he understood her, but it would be good to be wary of Frederick's people for a while. The girl thought to herself that, Wow, the one who could be her killer is worried about her every time she loses her vigilance because of his behavior, even though he is the main suspect. When they entered the hall, it was announced that Her Highness Princess Charlotte and His Serene Highness Duke Adler had arrived. There they were immediately met by Madame Taylor. She has a huge concession in the Empire, and is also the Emperor's sister, which makes her the aunt of our heroine. The woman stated that the last time they met, she was scary to look at, but since then, she seemed to have changed her preferences. She also heard that the girl had recently distinguished herself. Our heroine began to panic to herself. What had she heard about her? But suddenly, the woman added that the entire palace was now in her debt because she had saved the lives of everyone, including His Majesty. Moreover, she heard that it was Charlotte who suggested the idea of solving the problem of abundant wheat harvests by making alcohol. The Duke replied that she was right. It was an idea suggested by Her Highness the Princess. Taylor reported that in fact it was profitable, and as far as they know, she also owns an alcohol business. The woman invites them to her tea party, so she waits definitely. It may seem like a simple tea party, but in fact it is a gathering of the most influential and powerful women of the empire. Being invited there means that you have become one of these influential women, and for Charlotte, it means that her chances of becoming an heir have now increased to the skies. People around exclaimed that they heard that it was she who prevented the assassination attempt committed by the man from Cartina. At every internal meeting, she shows herself. From the best side, they say that the emperor recognized her palace. The princess thought to herself that this was on a completely different level when compared to Lady Mostyn's ball. Suddenly, a young man appeared who said that for the first time he was able to greet the princess. His name is Derek Pondam Linderman. Our heroine thought to herself, who knew that she would be the center of attention? It's good that she prepared in advance, after which she said that she had heard about him. He runs a successful business in the Principality of Demios. The guy replied that it was a great honor for him to be recognized by her. Suddenly, the Duke intervened in their conversation, saying that Her Highness would soon have to leave to attend an event at the Imperial Palace, so good luck. Linderman bowed and said that he hoped to meet her soon. The Duke retorted that he did not know whether there would be a reason for them to meet with Her Highness again. When he left, the princess asked if there wasn't still about an hour left before the event. The guy objected that they couldn't be late. After the girl expressed indignation that she had not even had time to exchange words with him, Adler asked if she had a reason to talk to him. A young man can't stand people who don't see boundaries and touch what belongs to him. The girl did not understand what they were talking about. Perhaps they had some kind of conflict related to their businesses. Suddenly, Duke Cillian approached them and addressed the princess. Our heroine asked what was the matter, whether he had any questions for her. The guy replied that at their last meeting, she pointed out to him that he was disrespectful towards her, so today he decided to say hello first. Our heroine was surprised that it turns out he knows how to listen to the words of other people. Suddenly, Cillian asked whether Duke Adler should not take part in the meeting of the Imperial League. As far as he knows, the success of the event depends on how well the meeting goes, so he thinks it would be better for him to leave first and start preparing. The Duke thanked him for his concern and said that he would leave for the meeting as soon as he had escorted Her Highness to the audience hall. Cillian asked to provide this to him because he was also invited to the event in the Emperor's audience hall. Then they began to argue loudly, and Adler told him that she was very grateful, but there was no need for it. The young man retorted that he did not remember asking his permission. The young man replied that if this was not so, then he was going beyond the bounds of what was permitted. The guy exclaimed that it was very interesting how he turned everything upside down. It was quite difficult to control oneself after such statements. Charlotte didn't understand why she hadn't been included in the conversation, yet if she was the center of the discussion, they themselves are asking for gossip around themselves, so openly conflicting with each other. And most importantly, in the end, she will turn out to be a villain who quarreled two eligible bachelors, after which she asked if she could decide for herself who would accompany her. Cillian replied that of course they would listen to her opinion, although he thought the decision would be obvious. The princess replied that if he opened the way for them, Duke Adler would have enough time to see her off, so she asked him to go about his business and leave them to theirs. After which the young men turned around and left, leaving Cillian alone and perplexed. On the way, our heroine said that she had already told him that all this was in the past, and she had forgotten that man. The Duke asked if it was all because of his dazzling beauty. Charlotte was indignant that he really remembered all her words to the last letter. The young man asked again why he couldn't remember them: light hair, shining like sunlight on a wheat field, deep, clear eyes the color of a serene lake, smooth porcelain skin. The girl immediately covered his mouth with her hand and exclaimed, "Isn't he ashamed to say such things with his own lips?" The Duke kissed her hand and said that she had forgotten about that man. Because of his beauty, he should make even more effort. More effort to ensure that she never remembers that man again. He will pick her up when the event is over. So there is no need to think about leaving with another man like last time. The Imperial Palace Feast is an event where representatives from each country greet members of the imperial family. To be more precise, the place where people swear allegiance to the emperor in a peculiar way is this audience hall in the Imperial Palace. There are those who arrived early. Camilla is still sulking over a missed reservation at the boutique. Why is she even competing with her so much? She had just begun to gain respect from people, and during this time, her sister had managed to acquire a good status in society. Why shouldn't she measure her strength with other more competitive imperial offspring? It was then announced that the event would soon begin, and that all those present needed to line up in their places. Seeing Cillian not far from her, the princess thought that they should have stood opposite each other. The arrival of His Majesty the Emperor and Her Majesty the Empress was then announced. Charlotte saw the Empress for the first time. She has enormous power in the Empire. It is no wonder that her children, Camilla and Frederick, are the main contenders for the place of heir. You suddenly hissed at the woman that she was just like her low-born mother, did not distinguish where the sky was, where the earth was, and wandered along the dirty roads like a yard dog. The princess noted to herself that this meant she knew that the girl had been wandering along dirty roads. Of course, this meant that same foray into Baker Street, which meant that the woman was in league with her son. The truth about which of her children the Empress preferred remained under a veil of secrecy, but now it has become clear that she has placed her bets on Frederick. The reason why Camilla was really not in a good mood became clear in any case. Charlotte was in the plus, after which she bowed and greeted Her Highness, thinking to herself that she would not fall for the Empress's tricks. As a result, the event finally began. The line of ambassadors, both hands filled with gifts and offerings, seemed endless. Suddenly, Frederick asked for a moment of attention and asked to be allowed to introduce them to a sugar supplier from the Principality of Demias. This is Charles Ogaton, owner of the largest cane farm in the Principality. He is a loyal subject of their empire. The emperor exclaimed that of course loyalty was important, especially when it came to the supply of such an important product as sugar. The prince added that he proposed his candidacy for the further distribution of sugar throughout all the allied countries, having secured the help of Her Majesty the Empress and the family of the Marquis of Dost. The women laughed and said that the prince had grown very much. He had personally visited the lands of Demias, which were distinguished by their severity, and had proposed this deal. The income of the imperial family from this union will exceed the multi-million gold revenue for many years. Our heroine noted to herself that Camilla didn't know about this either. The palace is a terrible place where even blood ties don't decide anything. But the princess had some strange feeling. It seemed to her that something was unclean here. Thanks to her work in her past life, she never forgot a person's name and face. If she saw them even once, she could recognize them, even when using disguise. She had definitely seen his face when she was studying the information about the Empire's allied states. But it was not Charles Ogaton. Do they really mean to say that he is engaged in cane farming on the oreland of Demios? The soil into which the substances of the ore flow cannot be suitable for farming. The guy said that he offers His Majesty powdered sugar of the highest grade. Then it dawned on her that it was the ambassador from Cortans who had come here 5 years ago, Sebastian Moran. If this powder comes into contact with fire, it will produce a huge explosion. He wants to scatter it. After which, our heroine loudly shouted his real name. Charlotte turned to Cillian and said that he needed to be caught immediately because he was a terrorist. The young man realized that he had been exposed and began to scatter powder around. The princess screamed for everyone to go outside immediately because everything here could explode at any moment. The girl asked someone to stop him so that he could not start a fire. Cillian immediately twisted him, and the man was indignant that they were dirty imperial people. May they burn in hell. Then, our heroine took off her hair ribbon and handed it to the young man so that he could tie his hands with it. When the girl started coughing, the guy asked if she was okay. She replied that yes, it was just that some powder seemed to have gotten into her throat. Suddenly, the attacker began to roll back and forth on the floor, and Charlotte realized that this was the most terrible way to create an explosion. His clothes became electrified, after which a fire and a powerful explosion occurred. When the princess came to, she could not understand where she was, and her whole body ached. Not far from her lay Duke Cillian. It seems he was alive, but had simply lost consciousness. This man heated the carpet by friction, and still achieved his goal. This kind of powder reacts even to the slightest electrical voltage. If she hadn't fallen on Cillian, she would have definitely died. It's good that he became her life preserver. Since our heroine did not understand where she was, she screamed to see if there was anyone else there. But then she thought that if there was a guy here, then someone would definitely come looking for him, but no one would definitely save her. After which she remembered the young man's words that he would come for her as soon as the event ended. The girl was surprised that she hoped that a man who could kill would come to save her. And then she realized that there must be some path that connects this place with the exit. Maybe she can get out of here if she goes in the direction of the wind. After which she confidently grabbed the young man by the legs and began to drag him along with her. After a short period of time, she just wanted to leave him there. He is very heavy. It would be much easier for her to move around alone, and she doesn't have any positive emotions towards him. Although it is difficult for her to move around alone, she will not expose herself to risk because of a man with whom she has no connection. But she still couldn't leave him, because if she left a man like that, who had put himself in danger because of her, she would become a simply terrible person. On the way, the girl saw some kind of brightly glowing crystal, but she couldn't understand what it was, a precious stone or something. It gives off such a bright light that it can be used to light the road. But suddenly, the crystal seemed to begin to vibrate, and a blindingly bright flash appeared. Our heroine did not understand what happened, but after that, it was as if he became an ordinary stone. But then she realized that she seemed to feel better. But while she was carrying him on herself, she had managed to get exhausted. Plus, on top of that, it was as if there were no wounds on her body. What was this? That's right, she recently read about something like this in a book when she was in the library recently. The magic stone, which was the source of magic, was mined in the Asgard Empire several decades ago. But in the 20th year, the last such stone was found on the island of Phoebe. And after that, no one found them. In the Empire, these stones definitely disappeared. And this is precisely why the magicians disappeared. So how did it happen that she found this stone in the basement of the palace? And it seems there were no others around, which is a pity, because they are terribly valued in this world. It would be simply wonderful if, with the help of magic, she could move to another place, or at least bring this person to his senses. But suddenly, a magical glow appeared from her hand, and the scratches on the young man's face began to heal. While the princess did not understand what had just happened, the guy began to come to his senses. Seeing her, the young man suddenly jumped up and asked what had happened. Charlotte exclaimed how good it was that he had woken up, but she thought to herself that if she wanted it very much, everything would happen, and finally, she was freed from this hard work. When she finished explaining the whole situation, Cillian said that he was now in her great debt. It was very difficult for her to lift him and carry him all this time. Our heroine replied that she could not leave the person who saved her life in danger, and she noted to herself that although she was a little mad, the result was pleasant. After which she stated that now was not the time to get upset. The wind was blowing from that direction, so they needed to continue moving there. The Duke asked to be allowed to accompany her, but suddenly he tripped and began to fall, to which the princess said that it would be best if everyone took care of themselves. On the way, the young man decided to break the awkward silence and said that he did not know that there were such tunnels under the palace. They did not seem to be the result of natural phenomena. When asked what if these were not natural caves, then someone in the empire had created them. The young man replied that he did not know exactly who it could be. This place was not under the control of the empire. Charlotte exclaimed, "Does he mean that there might be tunnels dug by enemy states here? If so, then the empire is in great danger. She will definitely investigate this issue when she gets out." I thought to myself whether it was worth considering that they had successfully fallen into this cave. Perhaps this was again the machinations of Cortina. Suddenly, Cillian said that thanks to her looking after him while he was unconscious, the guy was not hurt and was sincerely grateful to her. The girl objected that it was because he had saved her, but she noted to herself that she thought that the details about the magic stone should be kept secret. Suddenly, the young man added that he apologized for all the inconveniences he had caused her. Over the years, he knew how she felt, but asked her to give him a chance to improve in her eyes. The princess replied that she didn't even know everything that was between them wouldn't disappear just because they fell here because of the explosion. I also noted about you that just recently he was throwing mud at Princess Charlotte in front of everyone, and he thinks that a couple of minutes in the cave will make her forget about it. The young man objected that, however, she had saved him because he had saved her from death. The girl thought to herself that it was only because of her moral convictions. The guy continued that, when he woke up, he understood everything when he saw her bright smile, how sincere the girl was towards him. Our heroine did not understand what he was carrying. It was a smile of joy that she would no longer have to drag him. Well, okay, it's his choice. I don't want to argue with him in this situation. Then they saw some kind of hatch and decided that it was an exit. They could hear noise from outside and the sound of water. It seemed that this place was connected to the palace drain. The young man said that he would lift her up and she would try to open it. When the Duke caught her, he asked for forgiveness, because it was necessary, and therefore apologizes for such unceremoniousness. After the hatch began to rise, the guards immediately noticed it and began to shout who was there. The princess suddenly appeared and exclaimed that they should not stand like idols, but should come and help her. Charlotte asked if everything was all right with His Majesty, if other people who were in the hall were hurt. The knight replied that no one was hurt. The fact that the criminal ultimately did not reach his destination was due to the princess and Duke Cillian. When the young man said that they needed to return to the palace, the girl exclaimed that she would go with him. The imperial family and aristocrats are safe, but there are many wounded among the servants, as they were taken out last. Some of the guests exclaimed that the princess was safe. They were so worried about her, because she literally fell through the ground. God himself really saved her from surviving such an explosion. Our heroine replied that everything was fine. There was no need to worry. The princess looked for Adler and did not understand what was happening, but he said that he would definitely take her. Suddenly, a maid approached her and asked to be allowed to examine her wounds. The girl was very surprised as she heard that she was standing right next to the place of the explosion. But there was not a single scratch on her. The princess exclaimed that she was just lucky. Suddenly, John appeared next to her and asked if she was okay. Hadson then grabbed hold of her, sobbing and saying that thank God she had survived. The aristocrats were outraged. What kind of disgrace was this? And where was the respect for the princess? Our heroine hissed that she needed to talk to her servants separately, so she asked everyone to move away. After which she asked how they got here. The maid replied that they were so worried because they thought they had lost her. Today is Watson's day off, but he was worried about her and decided to come to the palace anyway. And then they suddenly heard an explosion. All the people were in their places, and only Her Highness was not visible. The building could have collapsed, but John still went to look for her. The girl exclaimed, I mean, he decided to look for her in those ruins. It's dangerous. The guy replied that only Duke Cillian's men were sent to search. He couldn't leave her in danger. The princess exclaimed what he would do if the building collapsed, a completely reckless act. The young man was indignant that she was suggesting that he simply watch her die or something. Their argument was interrupted by Cillian, who came up and said that he would like to express his gratitude again for saving him and let him repay her. The girl replied that, okay, in principle, he could pay her back with money. Suddenly, the young man asked her if she had noticed that Duke Adler had not even moved. The princess objected that it was none of his business, but the guy retorted that he was only telling the truth. After his words, our heroine turned around and began to walk away. Before everyone had time to recover from the incident with the poisoned food from the cook, who turned out to be a spy, a terror occurred that shook the entire palace. The angry emperor would like to wipe Cortina off the face of the earth, but it was impossible not to take into account all the natural benefits of their lands, which were very useful for the empire. Therefore, in the end of this situation, only the accomplices of the crime were left torn to shreds. Hadson was furious. This is a yellow press, not a newspaper. They need to be ruined because they slander the imperial family. The abandoned princess. If the imperial newspapers focused on what they did to the duke on the day of the explosion, Then the lower-ranked newspapers considered the completely different issue that the princess remained alone with her former love, and that Adler did not come to the rescue. The maid believed that the Duke must have had some good reason for not coming. In fact, Charlotte wasn't even offended, since she knows exactly why he wasn't there. It's a secret that only she knows about in the entire empire. Therefore, she replied that it was nothing to worry about, but her favorite assistant had come for her. John sighed heavily and said that the palace was teeming with criminals. At this rate, there would soon be no room left in the prisons, another bloody mess. It seems that Duke Adler is now at the front. The princess immediately asked what this meant. The young man replied that his lordship is now looking for everyone who could be involved in yesterday's event. They say he seized each of the lands of Demios, and Derek Linderman is also among them. After which he asked her if she thought the Duke was overreacting. The princess did not understand what he was talking about. Watson replied that he was somehow suspicious he didn't even show up at the scene yesterday, and today he was at the forefront of investigating the case. The girl was indignant that he really wanted to say that Adler was involved in this. It was clearly the people from Cortina who were to blame. John retorted that the culprit died at the scene of the crime, but the Duke had benefited greatly from the crime. If the mines were closed, only the Adler mines would remain. Charlotte screamed that these were completely unfounded accusations. The method of committing the crime was fundamentally different. The young man objected that this case was different from serial murders, since the motive was completely different. A criminal will do anything to get what he wants, so there is no such thing as a murderer killing in only one way. If he were in his place, he would never have stood aside upon hearing that his bride was in danger. Suddenly, a maid appeared and announced that Duke Adler had come to see the princess. During the meeting of the Imperial League, important things were discussed in the negotiating room. It's said that recently, threats to the empire have been growing with increasing force. Now everyone must be extremely careful. The young man thought that recently there had been a proliferation of all sorts of aristocrats who were always looking askance at the princess. Derek Linderman, who dared to touch Charlotte's hand with his lips. And this Duke Cillian, even just thinking about them is disgusting. His thoughts were interrupted by a male voice, which asked if he disagreed with something. The Duke replied that no, everything was fine. Suddenly, everything around literally began to shake. Those present did not understand what it was. Servants immediately burst into the room and shouted that there was an explosion, that there had been an explosion in the palace. The young man immediately rushed there since the princess was there. But there was a strong smell of blood around, so he couldn't get any closer. Alfred immediately ran up to him and said that he had heard that Charlotte had fallen into the ground along with Duke Cillian. The young man was already feeling bad, but the information he heard made him feel sick, after which the young man began to lose consciousness and was only able to weakly cry out the name of the princess. His bride was trapped underground by an explosion, and with his former love at that not running to the palace after such news meant one of two things. Either he doesn't love her, or he's a complete fool. When the boy came to, he was told that the princess was fine, she was safe, and was able to get out with Duke Cillian. The young man breathed a sigh of relief and said that they would go to the palace immediately. Alfred objected that he had been unconscious for several days and was now extremely weak. So was it really necessary to go to the palace right now? The Duke replied that he seemed to have said more than once that there should be no questions about his orders. The terrorist attack case was progressing smoothly, the search for related persons, an apology from the League of the Empire, the investigation of the crime scene. Well, and in the very first rows was Irenicus. She knew that he was not particularly pitiful, even on ordinary days. But this time, he was especially cruel. The Duke was passing the most terrible sentence that was possible in the Empire to all those who were somehow connected with this matter. Even Prince Frederick, who was one of the causes of the terror, could not escape punishment. The emperor ordered the prince's budget to be cut, and he to be closely watched for several months. Cillian stated that if it weren't for this incident, they wouldn't have known about the tunnels under the palace, so he would stay in the capital for a while and investigate the matter. His Highness said that he had helped them a lot. In this matter, the guy replied that nothing would have happened without Her Highness Princess Charlotte. She saved his life. The emperor exclaimed that indeed, according to her words, the young man was very nimble. It would be great if they were together. But then he glanced at Adler and added that, however, it didn't matter. Cillian immediately stated that there was no need to worry. Duke Adler would not be affected at all. He was more interested in his work than in the princess, the most devoted servant of the empire. Sometime later, the maid reported that Charlotte was in the living room. Adler noted to himself that her behavior was colder than before. Perhaps the day was just not going well. Suddenly, he saw a huge sculpture and was surprised that there had ever been something so ugly in the princess's courtyard. The maid immediately reported that it had recently arrived as a token of gratitude from Duke Cillian. This is a white swan carved from crystal, said to be the symbol of the Duke of Cillian's family. The delivery here alone must have cost millions of gold. Adler thought to himself, what a northern country bumpkin, not an ounce of intelligence. He decided to brag about his jewelry to the one who owns the mines. When he came to the princess, he immediately said that he was very glad that she was not hurt after yesterday's incident. After he started mumbling something unintelligible, trying to explain what had happened yesterday, the girl interrupted him and said that everything was fine. There were a lot of wounded yesterday, so she understood perfectly well why he hadn't come. Let her not worry, everything is really fine with Her Highness, and she is not offended. His prepared excuse did not have time to be uttered, because the princess interrupted him and smiled warmly. The girl added that she knew his situation very well, plus he had enough to do without her, so everything was fine. She had no reason to be upset. The young man did not understand why all these words were like a blade to his heart. It was true, but he really wanted to say that it was not so. After which he said that all people who slander about this incident will be punished. When the princess said that, she realized that he meant the gossips, but she did not hear his criticism among their words. The Duke realized that she had read everything. Charlotte added that his reputation would not be damaged by this incident, but that was not the point. The young man did not understand why she was comforting him, since all these gossips were criticizing her. After which he said that she has to listen to all these unflattering remarks about herself because of him, so she can blame him for everything. But to himself, he noted that it would be better for her to be angry with him. Angry and screaming. How could he leave her in such a position? But the girl objected that he was saying such things. She was very sorry that the dress was ruined. She was asking for forgiveness for ruining his gift. Adler exclaimed, "What difference does it make? He can buy her 20 of them. Does she really think that he behaves like this because of this?" The princess laughed and said that the truth was fine, so there was no need to worry so much and blame yourself. Suddenly, the young man asked why she said that everything was fine. Our heroine answered, because she likes him, and it seems like this is not the first time he's heard it. However, his icy and closed heart melted in an instant from these words, and between the fragments of ice love began to spread, which seemed to never stop flowing. One could say that this was the first spring that blossomed in his heart. A few days later, the case of the terrorist act in the empire was to some extent investigated, and between them and the Duke, who felt enormous guilt towards her, everything was fine. As soon as the Imperial Library, which had been closed for some time due to the terror, opened, Charlotte began investigating a new case. Suddenly, she carelessly turned the page and cut her finger on the paper. But the wound healed instantly. Regeneration. The power that healed not only her, but also Duke Cillian. It was definitely magic. So that stone is magical after all. But they disappeared long ago, along with the magicians. So how did it end up in the basement of the palace? A magic stone that is not fully ripe glows yellow. If you absorb magic from such a stone, it will be incomplete. Such magic manifests itself randomly and involuntarily. So it was an immature magic stone, and the power of regeneration was also incomplete. Better, of course, than nothing at all. But what does incomplete magic mean? And also regeneration, if she were to give it, then she could have given it something more aggressive, so that if a serial killer appeared in front of her, she could immediately send him to the next world. Suddenly, the librarian approached her and asked if something was bothering her. The girl replied that no, it was just that the book was a bit difficult. The woman said that she had been working in the library for 15 years and did not think that she would see her so often. Our heroine replied that she should get ready since the princess would come very often and bother her. Having seen the picture in the book, the theologian stated that she was interested in magic, and the woman was just writing a scientific article about magic stones. The girl replied that she knew that the wizards had disappeared because of the disappearance of these stones, but whether she knew why, she thought to herself that she needed to be careful and not show too much that she was very interested in this. The woman explained that several thousand years ago in all countries, the mining of these stones was so active that eventually they disappeared completely. The reason for the interest was that in war, wizards were the main weapon, and in their empire, they have not been mined for more than 50 years. However, there is a teaching that a magic stone can be born under special conditions. She is studying this issue. It turns out that wizards are born thanks to a magic stone having undergone careful selection and preparation. However, in extremely rare cases, it is said that a person can absorb magic if the stone chooses him. Our heroine muttered, "And if it turns out that such a stone appears in the empire again, and someone becomes a magician, then what will happen?" The woman replied that there would be chaos. The empire would definitely find a way to use this man for its own interests, and enemy countries would try to get rid of him. When asked if this was not some kind of attack magic, but simply healing, the librarian replied that this gift is the hardest to receive. They say that such a person receives the patronage of God himself. Then someone rang the bell on the counter, and the woman exclaimed that it was Mrs. Adler. "I'm coming." Upon seeing the princess, the woman immediately bowed to her and said that she was glad to meet her. Our heroine at first wanted to call her mother, but then she thought that it would be somehow strange because she looks at most like an older sister to her. Suddenly, the lady said that she had heard that Charlotte often went to the library. The girl replied that she did and asked if she also went there often. The woman replied that whenever Her Majesty wanted to see her, she used this library, having received permission from her. She was very fond of reading, and Clark selected excellent books for her. Our heroine stated that it seemed that they were very close to Her Majesty. The woman replied that yes, and it was a great honor for her. She herself did not have a good pedigree, so she had no connections in the secular world, but the Empress treated her very well, for which she was very grateful to her. When the lady left, the librarian exclaimed that she was as modest as she was beautiful, and that they would soon become one family. Charlotte noted that she was apparently also very friendly with her. Clark replied that of course she often dropped by the library and treated her kindly. Our heroine immediately came to the conclusion that it means she also visits the Empress just as often, but she doesn't like all this. Meanwhile, the Duke wrote that last time she had chosen the place for the meeting, and now it was his turn. Having received this letter, the princess thought that she had finally received an invitation. Going outside, our heroine was surprised when he managed to add a golden lion to the figure of the swan. The maid immediately exclaimed that these were not just any things. This crystal swan is worth 10 billion, and the yellow sapphire lion is worth 20 billion. Adler sent her this crazy lion statue, as if to compete with Cillian's crystal swan statue. How much treasure is hidden in his mines. He also sent 20 of the most luxurious dresses from the boutique, but she asked him not to worry about the situation during the Banquet of Empires. He still seems to feel very guilty towards her. Could it be that he is somehow connected with the terrorist attack, as he suggests? John. After that incident, the right to exploit the mines of the Duke of Dimios actually passed to the House of Adler, the yellow sapphire perhaps also from there. The thoughts were interrupted by the voice of a young man who greeted Charlotte and said that he was very glad to see her. Our heroine muttered that she had received a statue, but in the future he might not bother himself with such gifts. The guy replied that it was a top-quality yellow sapphire that matched the color of her eyes, definitely not a toy crystal. Then he extended his hand to her and said that he had prepared a special place for her today. When the girl wanted to take his arm, Adler for some reason blushed and turned away. The princess immediately decided that he was acting strange today, as if he was hiding something from her. Today, the greenhouse hosts an exhibition of rare plants and animals from the continent. The young man rented it entirely so that they could spend time together. The girl exclaimed how beautiful it was around, but in fact she was very hot. If you were going to drag her into the greenhouse, you should have at least warned her who you could go on a date with in a stuffy glass greenhouse in the summer. After some time, she sat down and suggested that they take a rest. How did he manage to look so fresh in this heat? Because she was already completely suffocating from the heat. The guy coughed and said that he was glad that they were spending time together, and the girl did not understand why he always made such conclusions. They were finally left alone, but there was absolutely no strength for an investigation. Perhaps he had brought her here on purpose. After the greenhouse, they headed to a restaurant. The Duke said that it was one of the most popular places in the empire. Booked 3 months in advance, they were greeted immediately and told to go to a private room. To start, we were offered lard with a dressing of seasonal fruits. The waitress said that the Duke had ordered it especially for the princess. The girl thanked her and said that she would definitely try it, but she thought to herself that because of the heat, she didn't want anything at all. But it was a famous restaurant, so it should be delicious. When Charlotte tried a piece, she wondered why he didn't eat anything, but only looked at her. It's poison. How could she forget it was also the cause of death of the victims in the series of murders? It's not her turn to die, yet does he really kill everyone indiscriminately? After some time, when our heroine came to her senses, at first she could not understand where she was. There was a devil with an angelic face nearby. Did he really decide to kill her? The guy immediately explained that she was in the hospital because she had fainted while eating. She seems to be allergic to the peaches used in the salad dressing. They say that she was in danger of dying, so it is simply a miracle that she came to her senses so quickly, as the groom was obliged to take this into account. The girl felt warmth in her body, probably due to the healing power of the magic stone. The Duke was not at all to blame. Adler continued that he wanted to show her an exotic tree. In a secluded place, the restaurant is famous for its fresh seasonal ingredients, so he thought she would like it. The guy planned the perfect date, but it ended up being a total nightmare. Our heroine noted to herself that he resembled a wet puppy, an elite among aristocrats, but he had no understanding of love at all. When the Duke added that she loved him, Charlotte laughed and asked what her feelings had to do with it. Adler replied that he simply wanted to please her in return for her sympathy. He was not used to being indebted to anyone. The girl thought to herself that such reciprocity was very strange, especially through a date after which she said that it turns out he was pleased with her, but usually they repay in kind. And she likes seeing him, so the goal has been achieved. She is having a lot of fun. Now the young man clarified that even when she suffered because of him, Charlotte answered that, yes, because he is very nice. She thought to herself that her surveillance of the Duke and his date had failed, but in fact everything was just wonderful. A few days later, the princess was thinking that today was somehow boring, both pasta for breakfast and the morning competition. Suddenly, a maid burst into the room out of breath, exclaiming that they had finally brought an invitation to tea. Our heroine was surprised that she ran as fast as she could because of such nonsense. The maid objected that it was not that simple. This letter was from Madame Taylor. Her letters were received only by influential ladies in social circles. Charlotte calmly replied that she had promised to invite her to the meeting of the Imperial League, so she had sent an invitation. Hadson was surprised why she had not said anything. Our heroine thought to herself that she was too busy with the terrorist attack. Would she be able to show herself well at all? A tea party will take place in one of the drawing rooms of the Imperial Palace. Upon seeing the princess, the woman stated that they had not seen each other for a long time. Charlotte bowed and thanked for the invitation, as this was her first time at her event. Looking around, the girl thought to herself that it was simply unbelievable there was only the cream of society around. Bloomer immediately exclaimed affably that she was so excited by the news that Charlotte would also be coming. To be honest, she was a little worried. Our heroine turned her attention to Camilla and Countess Christine, who fell for the swindler's hook. Madame Taylor said that the princess had done a good job at the meeting of the Imperial League. It is only thanks to her that everyone present can now enjoy tea in peace. The girls exclaimed that it was a great honor for them to meet her. A missed opportunity to meet such a beauty would have upset them greatly. Charlotta noted to herself that how kind it was on the part of the regulars of any event, but at Miss Mostyn's debutante ball, they didn't even deign to say a word to her. After which, she said that they were exaggerating. Perhaps her outfits were too modest to attract attention, weren't they? Taylor asked how Camilla was doing. It seems she wanted to open her own business with the young Countess Abigail, how things were going with them. The girl replied that some difficulties had arisen, but she was expecting new opportunities. The aunt stated that it was worth taking a more thorough approach to business. Then, coming to the conclusion that Lady Bloomer was close to Charlotte, the girl exclaimed that, yes, thanks to her wise words, the princess's advice was precisely how to assess the risks before opening your own business. Our heroine considered her naive, but at such tea parties, one could say real wars are always waged. The woman said, okay, enough about business. The empress said that it was necessary to find a bride for Duke Cillian. They had been friends for a long time, so it was very important to her. He would receive many offers from noble houses. Camilla immediately said that Countess Christine would be a very worthy match for him. The earldom of Abigail had always supported the empire. Aunt replied that they were certainly of great use. The girl said that her father was also at the palace today, meeting with the emperor, to discuss support for the empire. Taylor thought to herself that her family were manufacturers of military ammunition. And besides, Christine was a beautiful girl with a gorgeous figure, so apart from her bad temper and weak mind, she was quite a worthy match, after which she muttered that hadn't she been considered for marriage before? Camilla suddenly announced that her family had recently discussed an engagement with the Duchy of Adler. Their houses have long been connected, haven't they? Christine sighed heavily and said that it was a pity that by the will of the higher circles, this issue had already been closed. Does their conversation accidentally touch on Princess Charlotte? Our heroine replied that not at all, but she thought to herself that this was pure provocation. The Countess added that in fact the Duke was never interested in girls, but he said that if he married someone, it would only be her. Camilla immediately picked up that she had heard this too at Lady Tiffany's birthday. Charlotte could not believe that this was true, because he himself said that he had never loved, but he himself was led by this kind of person. Adler's feelings upset her anyway. The engagement was only her father's will. Apparently Lady Christina was his type. Our heroine jumped up, asked for forgiveness, and said that she needed to go to the boudoir. It seemed she needed to straighten her dress. Our heroine stood in front of the mirror and replayed this entire unpleasant conversation in her head. Suddenly, the doors opened and the Countess appeared. Our heroine did not understand why now. Therefore, she immediately said that she needed to go and walked past the girl. But suddenly, she heard a loud slap and turned around. There she saw that Christine had slapped herself, after which she began to grab the bottles that were standing near the sink and throw them on the floor. Then she sat down and began to sob and scream loudly. Our heroine did not understand what she was doing at all, and the Countess screamed that she was in great pain. When the maid appeared in the room, she was horrified by the picture she saw with her own eyes. Camilla appeared next, and the girl immediately began to stutter and say that Charlotte had attacked her. Madame Taylor came to all this noise and asked what was going on here. Sobbing, Christine said that the princess seemed to be hurt by her words. When she saw her, she became furious, threw things and hit her. Camilla was indignant that she had raised her hand against her because Duke Adler had taken a fancy to her, or because she might become engaged to Duke Cillian. Her voice sounded so convincing that such ridiculous accusations seemed true. Everyone immediately began to whisper that people do not change, and what's more, even in the article they wrote that the groom did not show any interest in her. Then the emperor suddenly appeared with Duke Adler, who asked what was going on here. The father immediately ran up to his daughter and exclaimed that he immediately demanded an explanation. Camilla reported that Christine said that her marriage with the Duke of Adler was discussed, which caused Charlotte's anger, and she could not contain her jealousy as usual. The guy interrupted her and said that His Majesty did not want to hear from her, but the girl exclaimed that the Duke had arrived in person. How opportune! It turned out that at Lady Tiffany's birthday party, he had declared his intention of marrying Lady Christine. The young man exclaimed, "I mean, when he said such a thing." But after that, the young man simply turned away and fell silent, not continuing to speak. Our heroine immediately realized that everything said was true. Adler said that the princess had not said a word yet, and one should not make any hasty conclusions. Camilla asked if she was saying that the Countess was already sitting on the floor when the princess entered. Charlotte replied that yes. The head of the Abigail house said that he cannot leave it all just like that, so he will file a lawsuit. He does not want to put up with the humiliation of his daughter. Let the emperor not forget that they provided the empire with weapons worth more than 10 billion gold pieces. His Highness immediately turned to Charlotte and ordered her to explain herself immediately. It is much easier to prove guilt if one party makes accusations, and the other party must provide evidence to refute them. All the evidence is against her. With Charlotte's reputation, she's in trouble. But as for Christine, she had long ago realized that she was not too smart to put on such a show in public. After which she approached her, swung sharply, and asked if she claimed that she had been hit by her in exactly that way. But the princess did not hit her, but abruptly stopped her hand near her face. Father was immediately outraged that she was doing such a thing now. The emperor also exclaimed that violence in such a situation was too much. Charlotte was simply hopeless. But the girl said that if she had already decided to defame her, then she should have done everything properly. Does she know that the cheek she pointed to is different from the one that is swollen? If she had struck her on the cheek with her right hand, it would have hit her on the left cheek, which she covers, but the cheek on which she allegedly struck her is on the right. It's a shame, but Christine, like her, is right-handed, so when she decided to hit herself, she didn't think and used her right hand. Camilla immediately asked how he could claim that it was the right hand. Were they both right-handed? Charlotte realized that from the way she was acting, they had planned it together, and replied that Miss had said that she had suddenly gotten angry and hit her. Hadn't she? And don't people who spontaneously attack use their usual hand? Let them go and check the tea table, both hers and Miss Christine's. All the tea utensils are on the right side. The maid ran to check it and confirmed the words spoken by Charlotte. Our heroine stated that she did it to get her into trouble, but she should have thought better. She already said this at the ball at Mostyn's. But the miss, as it were, is a little silly. Taylor was indignant that this was all true, and she had managed to lie right to the Emperor's face. Did she come up with it herself? Or did someone force her to do it? When the girl answered that she would do it herself, our heroine was surprised that her devotion had awakened, or she was simply afraid of Camilla. After which she declared that the torture itself was an insult to the imperial family. What Miss did not only apply to Charlotte, it insulted the entire dynasty. And if we act according to the Count's logic, then the entire Abigail family was to blame for everything. The man said that he could not ignore the rudeness towards his daughter and would go and write an official complaint to the court. In the punishment for insulting the imperial family, there is another penalty by law. She is aware that the dynasty has the right to collect rights to profits, and one of the businesses that their family owns is apparently logging. The counts immediately fell on their knees and began to ask forgiveness for the misunderstanding that had occurred. Let her forgive Catherine's stupid mistake. Charlotte replied that although their family served the imperial family faithfully in order to restore their authority, she would like to file a complaint with the court, but if their family demonstrated loyalty, then perhaps it would not be necessary to do so. The man replied that of course Abigail's family would provide them with any support they could. The emperor declared that insulting a member of the imperial family was a serious crime, but since his daughter was still so young, he would take this and her loyalty into account, and if the princess did not object, they would write it all off as a misunderstanding. Catherine immediately asked her for forgiveness for everything she had just done. The princess replied that it was okay, it was no sin to be weak in the head, but lying was a different matter. Thus, the party, which had turned into a madhouse, ended in a hurry. Suddenly, the Duke caught up with her, asking what had happened and why she was angry with him without turning around. Charlotte answered that everything was fine. They didn't arrange a date today, so she has no reason to look at Adler. Suddenly, the young man said that he was 9 years old. It was Miss Tiffany's 7th birthday party. His father and Count Abigail had been classmates at military school. Their families had been connected since childhood. And when the topic of uniting families came up at that birthday party, the young man said that if he had to choose, it would be Abigail's family. When asked why, the guy replied that he thought his family with its mining rights would make a great duo with those who make weapons. The absurd thoughts of a 9-year-old youth there had been talk of a wedding between their families, but not a single one since he had received the title of Duke. After hearing all this, our heroine asked why he was telling her all this. The young man answered, because he had seen the expression on her face when Princess Camilla spoke of him and Lady Christine. Charlotte replied that she didn't know what face he saw there, but it was like that because she was angry at their accusations. The guy replied that he himself was angry because she was not like that, and here's what he wanted to say. Miss Christine was absolutely not his type. When asked who his type was, Adler replied that he didn't even know if he should say anything since they didn't have a date today. After some time, the maid exclaimed that she had received an invitation to tea from a young noblewoman, namely from Lady Blumere, and yet she had never had a single girlfriend before. Charlotte muttered that she sometimes thought that there was sarcasm hidden behind this delight, but the maid objected that it was truly delightful, plus the letter was also from the Duchy of Adler. Our heroine replied that it was true, and therefore she was eagerly awaiting the appointed day. In their empire, the desire to visit a man could be interpreted ambiguously, so she could not pay a visit, and the Duke clearly did not intend to invite her. But her friendship with the suspect's sister gives her the advantage of searching his house without a warrant. A few days ago, the Duke declared that the carpet was somehow gloomy, The lighting was dim, the decorations were old-fashioned, everything needed to be replaced immediately. Alfred was indignant that he had planned the management of the estate for the following year and suddenly began to arrange the house. Paintings and sculptures are included in the budget, but what do curtains have to do with it? He can't even tell cotton from linen. Let him be honest. Is it all because of the invitation of his younger sister? Is it because of the appearance of a princess in the palace? The young man hissed that he had really decided to connect the Duke's work with Bloomer's personal invitation. The assistant immediately muttered that he had simply slept poorly. A few days later, Alfred said that if he was so worried, then why not come down, because he looked out the window every 5 seconds. Adler pretended not to understand what he was talking about, just watching the work of the gardeners, and nothing more. But suddenly, a carriage stopped near the palace, from which the princess appeared, accompanied by John. The Duke's younger sister ran out to meet her, and immediately greeted her. She had been looking forward to this day so much that she could not sleep from excitement. Then a young man came out to her and said that he was very glad to welcome her to his palace. When asked if she had arrived alone, the girl replied that Watson was accompanying her. The young man immediately realized that he had probably been escorted separately. Everything was very strict on their estate. Bloomer could not stand it and exclaimed that he had said that he had a lot of things to do. The brother objected that he would always find time to meet the princess. The sister was indignant that she was her guest, so she would take care of her, and he should go and do his own thing. After which she said that her mother had gone to another charity event, and her brother was busy with business, so they would have a great time, just the two of them. Inside, our heroine noted that their estate was simply wonderful, and it seemed like the renovation was very recent. The girl replied that they had indeed, literally just recently updated everything here. Her brother suddenly told her to make a replacement, and now everything around was so fresh and cozy. Our heroine began to panic. What kind of drastic changes had happened before her arrival? And anyway, he said that the stepmother was busy with the house typical behavior of a criminal, before interrogation, getting rid of evidence. That's why a search is always carried out. Suddenly could the Duke suspect something? During tea, Bloomer said that it seemed that Lady Christine was now banished from high society. Charlotte replied that the House of Abigail had allocated 200 billion instead of the promised 100. The Emperor was very pleased and even increased her budget. The Duke's sister noted that she was so brilliant at revealing lies because she could have had a lot of problems if it weren't for her. Suddenly, a maid appeared and said that Professor Norabon had arrived. Blymer was surprised because she had rescheduled the lesson for tomorrow. The maid suggested that he had simply mixed up the date, but she couldn't kick him out now. The girl exclaimed, what should she do now? Her mother found a new piano teacher who came today for some reason. Our heroine replied that it was okay. Let her take a lesson. The professor had come from far away. A couple of hours wouldn't change anything. The weather was fine. If she got bored, she could just take a walk in the garden. When the Duke's sister left, Charlotte thought that this was just great. She was left alone in the suspect's house. It was imperative to find something. Proof of his guilt or innocence is desirable. But as soon as she was about to leave the room, she immediately ran into Adler. Alfred explained that the way the Duke was fiddling with the pen in his hands was preventing him from concentrating, so he decided to bring his lordship here. The young man said that his sister had to go away, and he, as the head of the Adler house, would now take care of the guest. When asked if she liked it here, the girl replied that the estate was very beautiful, and she noticed that he had decorated the rooms in a new way. The guy exclaimed that he didn't know if she would like it, but if anything, he could change everything. The girl was surprised why she would do this in the Duke's residence. Adler coughed and added that, well, when they would live together. When the maid appeared in the room and said that she had brought tea, the young man immediately stopped her and asked what kind of fruit was on the plate. Was it a peach? The unexpected question made the maid lose her head, and she dropped everything she had on the tray. All the dishes shattered with a crash. When she began to collect the fragments apologizing, she accidentally cut herself, and blood began to drip from her finger. Our heroine understood that she would not leave until she finished cleaning, and the Duke was already on the verge of an attack. So she screamed, what is this? What did she do now? Her dress is ruined because of her. Let her get out of here immediately. After the maid ran out of the room in tears, the Duke instantly lost consciousness, and our heroine noted to herself that everything was much more serious than she thought.